Greetings, fellow fans. You're tuned into Gringotts Hub, presenting to you today, what if Harry found the Peverell-Black marriage contract and realized he was the Lord of Death at age 9, show some love by liking and subscribing. Enjoy the story ahead. Chapter 1, The Inheritance. The spider was watching him again. Harry had named it Gerald, because everything in the cupboard under the stairs deserved a name, even the things that would rather eat him than look at him. Gerald was fat and content, having built an impressive web in the corner where the ceiling met the wall, right above where Harry's head rested on the thin mattress each night. They had an understanding, Harry and Gerald. You don't crawl on my face while I'm sleeping, and I won't squash you with my shoe. So far, the arrangement had held. It was a Saturday in late October, and the Dursleys were in rare form. Aunt Petunia had decided the attic needed clearing because she'd seen a segment on morning television about home organization, and Uncle Vernon had decided this was an excellent job for Harry, because every job was an excellent job for Harry. Dudley had decided to spend the day on the sofa eating crisps, because Dudley had decided to spend every day of his life on the sofa eating crisps. The whole attic, Aunt Petunia said, her voice like a cheese grater dragged across porcelain. Every box. Every corner. And if I find so much as a speck of dust when you're done, no dinner, Harry finished. Yeah. I know. She gave him the look, the one that said I would like to hit you but the neighbors might see, and pointed toward the ceiling hatch. Harry climbed the ladder. The attic of number 4, Privet Drive was exactly what you'd expect from people who valued normalcy above all else, beige boxes, neatly labeled in Aunt Petunia's cramped handwriting. Christmas decorations. Dudley, age 3. Dudley, age 4. Dudley, age 5. An entire childhood preserved in cardboard. Harry counted 14 boxes with Dudley's name on them and 0 with his own, which was about right. The air was thick and hot, even in October. Dust motes drifted through a single beam of light from the small round window at the far end, and the whole place smelled of old wood and forgotten things. Harry pulled his oversized shirt away from his skin and got to work. He swept. He organized. He wiped down surfaces with the rag Aunt Petunia had thrown at him. It was boring, mindless work, and Harry's mind wandered the way it always did, to places far away from here, to lives that didn't involve cupboards and hand-me-down clothes and the constant, gnawing awareness that he was unwanted. He was halfway through the attic when he found the trunk. It was shoved into the farthest corner, behind a broken exercise bike Vernon had bought in a fit of optimism in 1986 and a stack of moldy Reader's Digests. Unlike everything else in the attic, it wasn't beige. It was dark, scarred leather with brass fittings gone green with age, and it had no label at all. Harry knew every box in this attic by now, and he had never seen this trunk. He crouched in front of it, studying the brass clasp. There was a design worked into the metal, 3 shapes arranged in a triangle. A straight vertical line inside a circle, all of it enclosed within a triangle. It meant nothing to him, but something about it made his fingers itch. He reached for the clasp and hesitated. Aunt Petunia's voice echoed in his head, "Don't ask questions." The first and most sacred rule of the Dursley household. Don't ask about the scar on your forehead. Don't ask about your parents. Don't ask why strange things happen when you're upset. Don't ask, don't wonder, don't think. Just sweep. Harry opened the trunk. Inside, there was a bundle of cloth, silvery, fluid, like liquid moonlight, and beneath it, a leather folio tied with a cord that might once have been red but had faded to a dusty brown. That was it. No letters from his parents, no photographs, nothing that said we loved you or we're sorry or here's why your life is the way it is. Just cloth and paper. Harry lifted the silvery fabric first. It was impossibly light, cool to the touch, and it seemed to shift and ripple even when he held it still. He draped it over his arm and watched, fascinated, as his arm vanished. Not faded, not blurred, vanished, as if it had simply decided not to exist anymore. He yanked the fabric off and his arm reappeared. Right, he whispered to the empty attic. Okay. His heart was hammering, but not from fear. From something else entirely. Something that felt, absurdly, like recognition. Like finding a glove that fit a hand he hadn't known was bare. He set the fabric aside carefully and picked up the leather folio. The cord fell away at his touch, not untied, just dissolved, as if it had been waiting for his fingers specifically. Inside was a single sheet of parchment. Not paper. Parchment. The real thing, thick and creamy and old enough that the edges had gone the color of weak tea. The writing on it was in dark ink, precise and formal, and Harry read it with the slow concentration of a boy who'd taught himself to read from Dudley's discarded picture books. Marriage contract enacted this day, the winter solstice of the year 1278, between the most ancient and noble house of Peverell and the most ancient and noble house of Black. By the terms set forth herein, witnessed by Magic herself, the bloodlines of Peverell and Black shall be joined in perpetuity. Should a single heir arise bearing the blood of both houses, that heir shall inherit the full rights, titles, vaults, properties, and sacred obligations of both families, including and without limitation the mantle of the Master of Death, first claimed by Ignotus Peverell and passed through blood and bone to those deemed worthy. This contract is sealed in blood and bound in magic. It cannot be broken by wizard, ministry, or mortal authority. It shall activate upon the touch of the true heir. So it is written. So shall it be. At the bottom of the parchment, where signatures should have been, there were two symbols. One was the same triangular mark from the trunk's clasp. The other was an elaborate crest, a shield with ravens and stars and a motto in French that Harry couldn't read. Harry stared at the parchment for a long time. Then a drop of blood fell onto it. He hadn't noticed the cut, a small one on his index finger, probably from the brass clasp, but the blood hit the parchment and everything changed. The ink blazed gold. The parchment grew hot in his hands, not painfully, but with a deep, thrumming warmth that spread up his arms and into his chest like swallowing sunlight. The triangular symbol on the trunk flared so brightly he had to shut his eyes, and behind his eyelids, he saw things. A river, dark and endless, with shapes drifting beneath the surface. 3 brothers standing on a bridge, bargaining with a tall figure in a cloak. A wand carved from elder wood, humming with a power that tasted like lightning. A stone, small and dark, that could pull whispers from beyond the veil. A cloak, the one he'd just held, that could hide its wearer from death itself. And a voice. Low and vast, like the sound the ocean would make if it learned to speak. Finally. Harry opened his eyes. The attic was different. The light was different. Everything looked sharper, more real, as if he'd spent his entire life looking at the world through a dirty window and someone had just cleaned the glass. And there was a figure standing in the corner where there had been nothing a moment ago. It wasn't solid, exactly. It was more like a shadow that had decided to stand upright and put on clothes, a long dark cloak, a hood that revealed nothing beneath it, and the suggestion of hands, pale and long-fingered, folded patiently in front of it. Harry should have screamed. He should have run. He was 9 years old and alone in an attic with something that was clearly, obviously, impossibly not human. Instead, he said, "You've been here the whole time, haven't you?" The figure tilted its head. When it spoke, the voice was the same one he'd heard during the vision, deep and layered, as if several voices were speaking in near-perfect unison. "Since you were 15 months old," it said. "Since the night the curse struck you and failed. I have been waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For you to find that document. For your blood to touch what was always yours. You are not easy to be patient with, Harry Potter. You are remarkably slow about some things." "I'm 9. "Yes. That's what I mean." Harry sat back on his heels and looked at the figure, really looked at it. The fear was there, somewhere, like a small animal hiding behind his ribs, but it was distant and quiet and nothing compared to the other thing he was feeling. The rightness of it. The absolute bone-deep certainty that this was supposed to happen. "Your death," Harry said. "Not a question. I am. And I'm, what? The Lord of Death. You are the heir of the Peverell bloodline, through your father, and the heir of the Black bloodline, through your grandmother Peverell-Black. That contract you're holding has been waiting 700 years for someone carrying both bloodlines to touch it. The hallows, the cloak, the wand, and the stone, are mine. Or they were. They are yours now. All three, and the mantle that comes with them. Harry looked down at the parchment, still glowing faintly gold in his hands. My grandmother was a Black. Peverell-Black married Charles Potter. Their son was your grandfather. The Peverell blood comes through the Potter line directly. You are descended from Ignotus, the youngest brother, the one who asked me for the cloak. The clever one. A pause. I liked him. So the story about the three brothers is real? Of course it is. Most stories are real. Humans just lose the important details over time and fill in the gaps with nonsense. Death shifted, and its cloak rippled like dark water. The cloak you have already found. It was your father's. Your mother hid it in this trunk before they went into hiding, as a safeguard. The other two hallows are elsewhere, and they will need to be claimed. But that is a matter for another day. Harry's mind was racing, but it was a controlled kind of racing, not panic, but calculation. He'd always been good at thinking fast. You had to be, when you lived with the Dursleys. You had to read the room, predict the blow, figure out the escape route before anyone knew you needed one. What does it mean, he asked. Being the Lord of Death. What does it actually mean? Death was quiet for a moment. It means, it said slowly, that you stand at the threshold between the living and the dead, and neither side can compel you. It means that magic, at its most fundamental level, answers to you in ways it answers to no other living being. It means that you will age, and live, and one day die, but only when you choose to. It means I am bound to you, and you to me, and we are partners in the oldest work there is. What work? Balance. The living fear death. The dead long for life. Someone must stand in the middle and keep the scales from tipping. That someone, for the last 700 years, has been no one, because no one has been worthy. The last Lord of Death was Ignotus himself. Since he died, the hallows have wandered, and the balance has suffered. Harry thought about this. That man, Voldemort. The one who killed my parents. He was afraid of dying, wasn't he? Death's voice went cold. Not angry. Colder than that. Like the bottom of a well in January. Tom Marvolo Riddle tore his own soul to pieces to escape me. He has cheated death, cheated me, and the violation of it has poisoned the balance of the entire magical world. He is a wound that will not heal while the fragments of his soul persist. Is he dead? No. He is less than alive, but he is not dead. He is, waiting. Hiding. A wraith clinging to existence in a forest in Albania, dreaming of a body he no longer has. Death paused. He made 6 anchors for his soul. Horcruxes. One of them is in your scar. Harry reached up and touched the lightning bolt on his forehead. It didn't hurt. It hadn't hurt in years, not since the headache stopped when he was 7. In my scar. A fragment. Tiny. Parasitic. It has been feeding on your magic since the night it lodged there, siphoning off a portion of everything you are. Death sounded almost offended. It is, to be blunt, an insult. A piece of that coward's broken soul, squatting in the head of my heir like a rat in a palace. Can you get it out? I could not, before. You had not yet claimed the inheritance. But now. Something shifted in Death's voice. Something that might have been amusement. You are the Lord of Death, Harry. A fragment of a mortal soul residing in your body without your permission is not a problem. It is a trespass. And you have every right to evict it. Harry closed his eyes. He could feel it now now that he knew what to look for. A tiny, cold knot of something wrong buried behind his scar, like a splinter of ice that had been there so long he'd forgotten it wasn't part of him. It was small and vicious, and it whispered, sometimes, in his dreams. "Tell me how," Harry said. "You don't need me to tell you. You already know. You've known since your blood touched that parchment. Reach inside. Find it. And push it out." Harry breathed in. He reached, not with his hands, but with something else, something that lived in the core of him and had been sleeping his entire life. It uncoiled now, vast and warm and absolutely certain, and it found the cold knot in his scar the way a searchlight finds a shadow. The fragment of Voldemort's soul screamed. It was a thin, reedy scream, more surprised than afraid, and Harry felt it thrash and cling and try to dig deeper, and he felt something rise in himself that was not anger, exactly, but something much older and more final. "No," he thought. "You don't belong here. Get out." He pushed. The pain was sharp but brief, like ripping off a bandage, and then something dark and oily and wrong tore free from his scar and hung in the air in front of him, a wisp of black smoke with a tiny, malformed face twisted in fury. Death raised one pale hand and the fragment dissolved. Not destroyed, collected. Gathered up and sent wherever the dead go when they've been lost for too long. "One down," Death said. 5 to go. But there is no rush. They are anchored to objects, not people. They can wait. Harry opened his eyes. The scar on his forehead tingled. When he reached up and touched it, the skin was smooth. Not healed, the scar was still there, but the wrongness behind it was gone. He felt lighter. Clearer. Like someone had turned up the brightness on the entire world. And his magic, the thing that had always been a wild, unpredictable force, making things happen when he was scared or angry, was settling into something else entirely. Something vast and controlled and utterly, terrifyingly his. He could feel the house around him. Not just the attic, the whole house. He could feel the electrical wiring humming in the walls, the water sleeping in the pipes, the foundations sunk into the earth. He could feel the Dursleys below him, Petunia in the kitchen, Vernon in his chair, Dudley on the sofa. Warm, solid, alive. He could feel Gerald the spider, the beating engine of its tiny heart. He could feel the street outside, and the streets beyond that, and if he pushed further, gently, Death warned. "You have the power of a fully realized Lord of Death running through a 9-year-old body that has been malnourished for most of its life. The spirit is willing but the flesh will need some time to catch up. Don't try to feel the whole world at once. You'll give yourself a nosebleed." Harry pulled back. "Sorry. Don't apologize. Just be measured. You have time." Harry sat in the attic for a while, the cloak in his lap, the contract in his hands, and Death standing silently in the corner like the world's most patient shadow. He thought about what he'd just learned. He thought about his parents, who'd died to protect him. He thought about a man named Voldemort who'd torn his own soul apart because he was afraid of the one thing Harry now commanded. He thought about the Dursleys, downstairs, who had spent 9 years treating him like vermin. "I'm not staying here," Harry said. "No," Death agreed. "You are not. Where do I go?" "You have houses. Vaults. Properties in your name that have been waiting for you, managed by goblins who take their fiduciary responsibilities very seriously. The Peverell estate. The Black properties. The Potter Vault. You are, in the purely material sense, obscenely wealthy. I'm 9. Can I just walk into a bank?" "You are the Lord of Death. You can walk into anything you like." Harry almost smiled. "That's not actually an answer. It is the only answer that matters. But in practical terms, the goblins deal in blood and magic, not age. You press your hand to the inheritance stone, your blood confirms your identity, and what is yours becomes accessible to you. The goblins will not care that you are 9. They will care that you are legitimate. Harry folded the contract carefully and tucked it inside his shirt, against his skin. He picked up the cloak, his father's cloak, his birthright, and something occurred to him. How do I get to Diagon Alley? I know it exists, I can feel it, sort of, like a place where the magic is thicker, but I don't know where. London. Behind a pub called the Leaky Cauldron. But not today. Today you have other business. What business? Death inclined its hooded head toward the floor. Toward the Dursleys. Unfinished business. Harry stood up. He was small for his age, years of meager meals and sleeping in a cupboard had seen to that, but something had changed in the way he held himself. His shoulders were straighter. His eyes, behind the round glasses, were steady and calm and very, very green. He climbed down the attic ladder with the cloak folded over his arm. Aunt Petunia was in the kitchen, arranging biscuits on a plate with the military precision she brought to all domestic tasks. She didn't look up when Harry entered. She never looked at him if she could avoid it. Did you finish the attic? Not yet, Harry said. We need to talk. She did look up then, and something in his voice made her frown. It wasn't the words. Harry had said plenty of words over the years, and Petunia had ignored most of them. It was the tone. Calm. Certain. Completely without fear. Petunia Dursley had never heard Harry Potter speak without at least a trace of fear before. We don't need to do anything, she snapped. Get back up there and finish, or, sit down, Aunt Petunia. The kitchen chair pulled itself out from the table. Not violently, smoothly, silently, as if an invisible butler had drawn it back for her. Petunia stared at the chair, then at Harry, and her face went white. You're doing, don't you dare use that freakishness in my house, sit down. She sat. Not because the magic forced her, Harry wouldn't do that, but because something in his eyes told her, very clearly, that the dynamic in this house had just shifted in a permanent and non-negotiable way. Harry sat across from her. He placed the cloak on the table between them, and watched her eyes go wide with recognition. You know what this is, Harry said. Petunia's lips pressed together so tightly they almost disappeared. Her eyes were locked on the cloak, and her face was doing something complicated, anger and fear and something older, something that looked almost like grief. That was, my father's. You hid it. In the attic, in a trunk with the Peverell-Black marriage contract. I didn't hide anything. That trunk came with you. On the doorstep. I shoved it up there and forgot about it. Her voice was shaking, but she was still trying to hold on to the rigid, clipped authority she'd wielded over Harry his entire life. I wanted nothing to do with any of it. You knew my mother was a witch. Of course I knew. The words burst out of her like steam from a kettle. I knew before anyone else. Before that awful Snape boy told her, before the letter came, I knew, and I hated it, because she was my sister and she was special and I was nothing, and then she went off to that world and left me behind. She stopped. Pressed her hand over her mouth. Behind the fury, her eyes were wet. Harry watched her. He didn't feel sorry for her, he wasn't sure he'd ever be able to feel sorry for Petunia Dursley, but he understood something he hadn't understood before. She wasn't cruel because she enjoyed it. She was cruel because she was afraid. Afraid of magic, afraid of the world that had taken her sister and gotten her killed, afraid that if she let Harry be what he was, it would take him too, and all the sacrifice of raising him would mean nothing. It didn't excuse a single thing she'd done. But it explained it. I'm leaving, Harry said. Petunia blinked. What? I'm leaving this house. Tonight. I know what I am now, and I know what's mine, and none of it is here. I'm not asking your permission. I'm telling you because, despite everything, you fed me. You kept a roof over my head. Even if the roof was a cupboard. He paused. That's worth a goodbye. You can't leave. You're 9 years old. Where would you go? The authorities won't find me. Won't look for me. Trust me on that. From the living room came the thunder of Vernon's footsteps. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, massive and red-faced and already halfway to angry, because Vernon was always halfway to angry. What's going on? Petunia? Why are you sitting with the boy? He should be. His eyes landed on the cloak. Then on Harry's face. What's that? Uncle Vernon, Harry said. Sit down. I will not sit down in my own house because some ungrateful. The second kitchen chair pulled itself out. Vernon stared at it, and the color drained from his face so fast it was almost funny. His mustache quivered. What did you? I'll say this once, Harry said, and his voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. I know you're afraid of magic. I know you've spent 9 years trying to stamp it out of me, and I know it's because you're terrified of anything you can't understand or control. But here's the thing, Uncle Vernon. I'm not angry. I'm not going to hurt you, or curse you, or do any of the things you've been imagining. I'm just going to leave, and you're never going to see me again, and you can go back to being perfectly, wonderfully, boringly normal. Vernon opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. He looked like a fish that had been dropped on a carpet. You can't, the old man, Dumbledore, he said you had to stay here. He said it was for your protection. Harry tilted his head. What old man? Petunia and Vernon exchanged a look. It was the look of two people who had been keeping a secret and had just realized the secret was out. The night they left you on our doorstep, Petunia said quietly. There was a letter. From a man named Albus Dumbledore. He said you had to stay with us. He said your mother's sacrifice created some kind of magical protection, tied to her blood. My blood. He said as long as you lived with her blood relatives, you'd be safe from the one who killed her. Harry went still. He could feel it. Now that she'd said it, now that he knew to look, he could feel the magic woven into the walls of the house. It was old and fading and nowhere near as strong as it should have been, because the protection was powered by love and there was precious little of that in number 4, Privet Drive. But it was there. A blood ward. Someone had placed a blood ward around this house and sealed a child inside it. Dumbledore, Death said softly, and only Harry could hear. The old spider. He placed you here deliberately, Harry. Not just for protection. For control. A weapon, kept in a cupboard until it was needed. He has been planning your life since before you were born. Harry's jaw tightened, but he kept his face smooth. 9 years in this house had taught him to control his expressions the way a diplomat controls theirs. The protection doesn't matter anymore, Harry said. I don't need it. The letter said, I don't care what the letter said. The man who wrote it put a baby on a doorstep in November and walked away. Whatever his reasons, he doesn't get to decide where I live or who I am. Not anymore. He stood. He picked up the cloak and the parchment, and he looked at the Dursleys, really looked at them, for what he knew would be the last time. Vernon, purple-faced and afraid. Petunia, rigid and trembling. Two small, frightened people who had done their best with something they couldn't understand, and whose best had been terrible. Goodbye, Harry said. I won't bother you again. He walked out of the kitchen. You can't just, boy. Vernon surged to his feet, his face mottled with purple fury, and he lunged forward to grab Harry's arm. His hand passed through empty air. Harry was standing in exactly the same spot, but Vernon's fingers closed on nothing. He tried again. Same result. His hand went through Harry's shoulder like it was smoke. What the bloody, Harry glanced back. I said goodbye, Uncle Vernon. He walked down the hall. Behind him, he heard Dudley's voice from the living room, Mum. Why's Dad yelling? And then he opened the front door of number 4, Privet Drive and stepped out into the cool October evening. The street was quiet. Street lamps were flickering on, casting pools of orange light on the pavement. Somewhere, a dog barked. The sky was heavy with clouds, and the air smelled like rain and dying leaves. Harry stood on the front step and breathed. "Where would you like to go?" Death asked. "Somewhere mine. The Potter cottage in Godric's Hollow is a ruin. The Peverell estate is in Cornwall, remote, warded, forgotten by the magical world for centuries. The Black family home is in London, but it is unpleasant. Generations of dark magic and worse temperaments. Cornwall, then. It is 200 miles from here. Can I get there?" Death's silence had texture to it. Amusement, mostly. "You are the Lord of Death. Space is a suggestion, not a rule. Think of where you want to be, and step." Harry thought of Cornwall. He'd never been there, he'd never been anywhere, but he could feel it through the vast new sense that hummed in his bones. The land, ancient and salt-bitten, cliffs falling into grey sea, and somewhere in the folds of the coast, a house that had been waiting for someone to come home. He stepped off the front porch of number 4, Privet Drive, and his foot came down on wild grass. The wind hit him first, cold and fierce and carrying the sound of the sea. He was standing on a cliff top, and below him, the Atlantic was throwing itself against the rocks with the kind of patient violence that had been going on since before humans existed. The sky was enormous here, a vast grey dome streaked with the last copper light of sunset, and the air tasted like salt and rain and freedom. Behind him, half buried in the hillside like something that had grown there rather than been built, was a house. It was made of dark stone, with a slate roof and windows that glowed with a faint, warm light despite having been empty for decades. Ivy crawled up the walls, and the front door was heavy oak with iron fittings and the same triangular symbol from the trunk, the Peverell mark, carved deep into the wood. Harry walked up to the door and pressed his hand against it. The house knew him. He felt it, a wash of recognition, warm and welcoming, like being greeted by someone who loved you and had been worried about you for a very long time. Wards flared and settled, ancient protections older than Hogwarts recalibrating themselves around their new master. The door swung open. Inside, it was larger than it looked, magic, obviously. The entrance hall was stone-flagged and lined with portraits that blinked and stretched and stared at him with undisguised shock. A fire roared to life in a massive hearth, and candles lit themselves along the walls, and somewhere in the depths of the house, Harry heard the small, sharp crack of something appearing. A creature materialized in the hallway. It was small and wrinkled, with bat-like ears and enormous, luminous eyes, dressed in a crisp white pillowcase that had been hemmed into something resembling a toga. It stared at Harry. Its lower lip trembled. "Master," it whispered. "Master Peverell." "I'm Harry," Harry said. "Harry Potter." The creature's eyes went even wider, which shouldn't have been physically possible. "Harry Potter is the Peverell heir. Harry Potter has come home." "I think so." "Are you, Mipsy, sir?" "Mipsy is the Peverell house elf. Mipsy has been maintaining the estate for," she paused and counted on her fingers, ran out of fingers, and started over. "A very long time, sir. A very, very long time." Mipsy was beginning to think no one would ever come. "I'm sorry it took so long." Mipsy burst into tears. Not sad tears, overwhelmed, joyful, hysterical tears. She threw herself at Harry's knees and sobbed into his shins, and Harry stood there awkwardly, patting her head, while death loomed in the doorway and radiated quiet amusement. "Mipsy," Harry said gently, after a minute. "I'm really hungry. Is there food?" Mipsy pulled back, her enormous eyes blazing with sudden purpose. "Food? Food? Master Harry is hungry. Mipsy will make food. Mipsy will make the best food. What does Master Harry like?" "Mipsy can make anything. Mipsy has been practicing for decades with no one to cook for, and Mipsy is very good." "Anything," Harry said. "I'm not picky. I'll eat anything." Mipsy vanished with a crack, and Harry heard the distant sounds of pots and pans being mobilized with military efficiency. He wandered through the house. It was beautiful, in a wild, ancient way, nothing like the sterile tidiness of Privet Drive. The walls were stone, hung with tapestries that moved like living paintings. There was a library that stretched up 3 stories, packed with books that hummed faintly with magic. There was a study with a desk made of dark wood and a chair that adjusted itself to his size when he sat in it. There were bedrooms, half a dozen of them, with 4-poster beds and windows that looked out over the sea. Harry chose the one at the top of the house, a circular room in a tower with windows on every side. The bed was enormous, the mattress thick and soft, and when he sat on it, the sheets warmed themselves around him. He sat in the tower room and stared out at the darkening sea, and for the first time in his life, he felt the complete absence of fear. Not happiness, not yet. Happiness was complicated, and his life had been short but very hard, and you didn't go from a cupboard under the stairs to a cliff-top manor without some adjustment time. But the fear was gone. The constant, low-grade terror that had been the background noise of his existence since he could remember, fear of Vernon's temper, Petunia's cruelty, Dudley's fists, the dark, the cold, the hunger, all of it was gone, replaced by something quiet and strong and completely certain. "How do you feel?" Death asked. Harry considered the question honestly. "Like I just woke up. Like I've been sleeping my whole life and I just now opened my eyes. That is a reasonable description of what happened. I have questions. I would be concerned if you did not." "Dumbledore. Tell me about him." Death settled into the corner of the room, a darker shadow among shadows, and spoke. "Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. Considered the greatest wizard of the age. Headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot. Supreme Mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards. He is brilliant, powerful, and completely convinced that he alone knows what is best for the magical world. You don't like him. I do not like or dislike mortals. But I am wary of him. He spent his youth obsessed with the Deathly Hallows. He sought them. He believed, correctly, that uniting them would grant mastery over death. He wanted that mastery, Harry. He wanted it badly enough to plan a campaign with Gellert Grindelwald to find them, a campaign that ended with the death of his own sister. Harry looked up sharply. He killed his sister. It was a 3-way duel. Dumbledore, Grindelwald, and Dumbledore's brother Aberforth. The killing curse came from one of them, and no one knows whose. What is certain is that Dumbledore's 14-year-old sister Ariana died, and Dumbledore has carried the guilt ever since. It shaped him. Tempered his ambition with caution. Made him the kind of man who refuses to seize power directly but cannot resist pulling strings from behind the curtain. And he has one of the Hallows. The Elder Wand. He won it from Grindelwald in 1945, in the famous duel that ended the Wizarding War. He has carried it ever since. He knows what it is. He knows its history. And he has used its power to position himself as the most formidable wizard in Britain. It answers to him, for now. But its true allegiance is to you, and it knows it, and that will make things interesting when the time comes to claim it. Harry filed that away. And the third Hallow? The stone. The Resurrection Stone. It was set into a ring by the Gaunt family, descendants of Cadmus Peverell, the second brother. The ring was hidden in the Gaunt family shack in Little Hangleton. But Tom Riddle found it and turned it into one of his Horcruxes. It is there still, cursed, corrupted, and waiting. So I need to get the wand from Dumbledore and the stone from a cursed shack full of dark magic. Harry almost laughed. Brilliant. You don't need to do anything tonight. Eat. Rest. Sleep in a real bed for the first time in your life. The Hallows have waited 700 years. They can wait a few more days. As if on cue, Mipsy appeared with a crack, levitating a tray that held more food than Harry had ever seen directed at him personally: roast chicken, potatoes, vegetables, bread with butter, a thick soup, and a slice of treacle tart that was still steaming. She set it on the desk with trembling hands and watched him with barely contained anxiety. Is it all right, Master Harry?" Harry picked up a chicken leg and bit into it, and his eyes went wide, because it was the best thing he had ever tasted, which admittedly wasn't a high bar when your previous best was a slightly stale sandwich Dudley had rejected, but still. "Mipsy," he said, with absolute sincerity. "This is incredible." She burst into tears again and vanished. Harry ate everything on the tray. Then he ate the second tray Mipsy brought, and the third. He drank a glass of milk that was still warm from somewhere, he didn't ask, and he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and sat back in his chair and felt, for the first time in his life, full. Not just full of food. Full of possibility. He changed into pajamas that appeared in the wardrobe, soft and warm and exactly his size, because the house knew him and the house provided, and he climbed into the enormous bed in the tower room, and the sheets folded around him like a gentle hand. Through the window, the stars were coming out over the sea. The waves crashed against the cliffs below, a deep and rhythmic thunder that was the most soothing sound Harry had ever heard. "Sleep," Death said, from somewhere in the darkness. "Tomorrow, we begin." "Begin what?" "Everything." Harry smiled into the pillow. It was the first time he had smiled, really smiled, with his whole face and his whole heart, in longer than he could remember. He slept. And for the first time in 9 years, there were no nightmares. He woke at dawn. Not because he was afraid, the old habit of waking before the Dursleys so he could start breakfast, but because the light through the tower windows was extraordinary. The sun was coming up over the sea, and the entire world was pink and gold and burning. Harry stood at the window in his pajamas and watched the sunrise, and the power in his chest hummed quietly, contentedly, like a cat by a fire. Mipsy appeared with breakfast, eggs, bacon, toast, sausages, fried tomatoes, mushrooms, a pot of tea, orange juice, and a bowl of porridge with honey, and Harry was beginning to suspect that her primary coping mechanism for decades of loneliness had been perfecting her cooking, which was fine by him. "Mipsy," he said, between bites of bacon. "How much do you know about the Peverell estate? The vaults, the properties, the legal status?" Her ears perked up. "Mipsy knows everything, sir. Mipsy has been keeping the records. The Peverell vault at Gringotts has not been accessed in 112 years. The Goblin account managers have been investing in growing the assets per the standing instructions left by the last Lord Peverell, that is, Master Harry's great-great-great," she paused. "Many greats grandfather. The current estimated value is," she squeezed her eyes shut and her lips moved silently. "Very, very large, sir. Mipsy does not know all the numbers. The Goblins would know. And the Black estate? Mipsy does not know as much about the Blacks, sir. But Mipsy knows there is a house in London, number 12, Grimmauld Place, and a vault at Gringotts, and the Blacks were a very old, very wealthy family, and very," she hesitated. "Very dark, sir. Many dark wizards in the Black family. But not all of them." "No, sir. Not all. Master Harry's grandmother Doria was a good witch. And there was Master Sirius." Mipsy stopped. Her eyes went wide and worried. Mipsy should not speak of it. Harry set down his fork. "Sirius? Who is Sirius?" "Sirius Black, sir. He was Master Harry's godfather." "Was? What happened to him?" Mipsy twisted her hands together. "He is in Azkaban, sir. The wizard prison. They say he betrayed Master Harry's parents. They say he told the Dark Lord where to find them." The kitchen went very quiet. Harry's tea sat untouched, slowly going cold. "This," Death said, "is something you should investigate. There are irregularities." "What kind of irregularities?" "Sirius Black was never given a trial." Harry's eyes went hard. "What?" "He was arrested, accused, and thrown into Azkaban without a trial. No veritaserum. No testimony under oath. No review of evidence. The Minister of Magic at the time, Bartemius Crouch Sr., was operating under emergency powers and simply had him locked away. In 13 years, no one has questioned it. Dumbledore was Chief Warlock. He could have demanded a trial. He did not. Harry picked up his tea and drank it. It was cold, but he didn't notice. "We're going to Gringotts today," he said. "And then we're going to find out the truth about Sirius Black." Mipsy's ears drooped. "Master Harry has only just arrived." "Perhaps Master Harry should rest. I've been resting for 9 years, Mipsy." "I'm done resting." He pushed back from the table and stood. "Is there a way to get to Diagon Alley from here?" "The Peverell estate has a Floo connection, sir. The fireplace in the study is connected to the Floo network. Mipsy has been maintaining it. Just step into the flames and say, 'Diagon Alley.' Step into flames. It does not burn, sir. It tickles." Harry considered this, then shrugged. His life had already gotten sufficiently strange that stepping into a fireplace barely registered. He changed out of pajamas into clothes that the wardrobe provided: dark trousers, a white shirt, a black jacket that fit him perfectly and had the Peverell crest embroidered subtly on the inside of the collar. The clothes were simple but well made, and when Harry looked at himself in the mirror, he barely recognized the boy staring back at him. He was still small. Still thin. Still scarred. But his eyes were different. There was a depth to them now, a quiet authority, that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with what lived behind them. "Right," he said to his reflection. "Let's go upset some people." He walked down to the study, stood in front of the massive stone fireplace, took a handful of glittering powder from a pot on the mantel, and threw it into the flames. They turned green. Bright, vivid, emerald green. Harry stepped into the fire. Mipsy was right. It tickled. "Diagon Alley," he said clearly, and the world spun, and the last thing he saw before the flames took him was Death, standing in the corner of the study, arms folded, watching him go with what might have been pride. "Give them hell, my lord." The fire spat Harry out into a dingy pub. He stumbled, caught himself, and straightened up, brushing soot from his jacket. The pub was dim and smelled of old beer and pipe smoke, and the handful of patrons hunched over their drinks barely glanced at him. This was the Leaky Cauldron. He could feel it, the border between the mundane world and the magical one, a thin place where reality was stretched like fabric over a frame. Beyond the back wall, Diagon Alley buzzed with magic so dense it was almost visible. Harry walked through the pub. Nobody stopped him. Nobody recognized him. The boy who lived was supposed to be living with his Muggle relatives, hidden and protected and ignorant. No one expected him here, and the benefit of being 9 years old was that adults rarely looked twice. The brick wall at the back opened at his touch. He didn't need a wand, didn't need to tap a pattern, just pressed his palm flat against the stone and pushed with the same force he'd used to expel the Horcrux from his scar. The wall folded open like a door. Diagon Alley spread before him in all its chaotic, glittering, impossible glory. Harry walked into the magical world with his shoulders straight and his head high, and the power of the Lord of Death humming in his bones like a song, and he didn't look back. Not once. Chapter 2, The Wand and the Stone. Diagon Alley was chaos wrapped in cobblestone. Witches and wizards bustled past in robes of every color imaginable, carrying packages and dragging children and arguing about Quidditch scores. Owls drifted overhead, carrying letters and parcels. Shop windows blazed with moving displays, broomsticks that hovered in mid-air, cauldrons that stirred themselves, books whose covers changed every few seconds. The smell was extraordinary, a mix of roasting chestnuts, fresh parchment, something like ozone, and the faint, sweet undercurrent of raw magic. Harry stood at the entrance and let it wash over him. It was louder than he'd expected. More crowded. More alive. After 9 years at Privet Drive, where everything was muted and beige and exactly the same as everything else, the sheer screaming color of it was almost overwhelming. Almost. He walked. He didn't gawk or stop or press his face against shop windows, even though part of him, the 9-year-old part, the part that had never owned anything that wasn't broken or secondhand, wanted to. He walked with purpose, moving through the crowd like a stone through water, and the crowd parted around him without quite knowing why. People glanced at him and looked away. Not because they recognized him, but because something in the way he moved, the way the air felt around him, told them on a deep and primal level that this particular child was not to be trifled with. Gringotts sat at the far end of the alley like a white marble fist. It towered over the surrounding shops, leaning slightly, as if it were looking down at the rest of the street with amused contempt. The doors were burnished bronze, flanked by 2 goblins in scarlet and gold uniforms who held spears and expressions that said, very clearly, "Try something. Please." Harry walked up the steps. The goblin's eyes tracked him, not hostile, but watchful, the way a predator watches something it hasn't categorized yet. He pushed through the bronze doors, then through a second set of silver doors that had words engraved on them. A warning about thieves. Harry read it, filed it away, and kept walking. The interior of Gringotts was a cathedral of commerce. A vast marble hall stretched before him, lined with high counters where goblins sat on tall stools, weighing coins, examining jewels, scratching figures into enormous ledgers with quills that moved almost too fast to see. The ceiling was lost in shadow. The floor was so polished Harry could see his own reflection, small and dark-haired, looking back at him with steady green eyes. He walked to the nearest available counter. The goblin behind it was ancient, with a sharp nose and sharper eyes and fingers like bundles of twigs. He was examining a ruby the size of a quail's egg through a jeweler's loupe and didn't look up. "I'd like to speak with someone about claiming my inheritance," Harry said. "Name?" the goblin said, still not looking up. "Harry James Potter. Heir to the houses of Potter, Peverell, and Black." The ruby hit the counter. The loupe fell from the goblin's eye and dangled from its chain. He stared at Harry with an expression that, on a goblin, might have been shock, or might have been indigestion. It was hard to tell. "Did you say Peverell?" "I did." The goblin leaned forward. His eyes swept over Harry with the clinical precision of someone appraising a particularly valuable artifact. He lingered on the scar, on the green eyes, on the way the air seemed to hum faintly around the boy. "Wait here," he said, and vanished behind a door so quickly Harry almost missed it. He returned 90 seconds later with another goblin. This one was different, older, if that was possible, with deep lines etched into a face the color of old leather and eyes that burned like banked coals. He wore a suit of dark fabric rather than the bank uniform, and a gold chain across his waistcoat that suggested seniority of the highest order. "Ragnarok," the first goblin said, gesturing. "Director of Gringotts." Harry looked at the director. The director looked at Harry. "Follow me," Ragnarok said. He led Harry through a series of corridors that grew progressively older and less polished as they went deeper into the bank. The marble gave way to stone, the stone to rough-hewn rock, and the air grew cooler and carried the faint, metallic tang of old gold. They passed doors that hummed with protective magic, vaults that radiated heat or cold or something harder to name, and corridors that branched off into darkness. Ragnarok's office was at the end of a long passage, behind a door of black iron. Inside, it was surprisingly comfortable, a large desk, leather chairs, a fire burning in a stone hearth, and shelves of ledgers and artifacts that practically vibrated with contained magic. The goblin sat behind his desk and gestured Harry into the chair opposite. "I will be direct," Ragnarok said. "In 73 years as director, I have had exactly 2 humans sit in that chair. One was Albus Dumbledore, who came to discuss the security of a certain philosopher's stone. The other was Peverell-Black, who came to discuss his will. You are the third, and you are 9 years old, and you have just claimed a bloodline that has not been active in over a century." He steepled his fingers. "Explain." Harry reached into his jacket and produced the marriage contract. He laid it on the desk. Ragnar picked it up. His eyes moved across the parchment, and with each line, something shifted in his expression. By the time he reached the bottom, his hands were trembling, not with fear, but with the barely contained excitement of a banker who has just been presented with the most significant transaction of his career. "This is genuine," he said. "The magical signatures are intact. Peverell-Black, sealed in blood." He looked at Harry. "The inheritance stone will confirm it, but I already know what it will show. I can feel it on you, Mr. Potter. The Peverell magic." He paused. "And something else. Something much older." "I'd like to proceed with the inheritance ritual," Harry said. "All three houses, Potter, Peverell, and Black. The Potter inheritance is straightforward. Your parents will name you sole heir. The vault has been held in trust, managed by the Goblin Nation per standard protocols. The Peverell inheritance will require blood confirmation, but the contract you've produced is sufficient to trigger the process." Ragnar hesitated. "The Black inheritance is more complex. Because of Sirius Black." Ragnar's eyebrows, what there was of them, rose. "You know about Sirius Black?" "I know he's my godfather. I know he's in Azkaban. And I know he never had a trial." Something flickered in the goblin's eyes. "Respect, maybe. Or the particular satisfaction of watching someone else reach a conclusion you've held for years." "The Black family magic follows its own rules," Ragnar said carefully. "The current head of the House of Black is, technically, Arcturus Black, but he died in 1991. His will named Sirius Black as heir, but Sirius is a convicted criminal, and the Ministry has blocked all attempts to execute the will. However, he tapped the marriage contract with one long finger. This supersedes Ministry authority. This is a blood contract, older than the Ministry, older than Hogwarts, sealed by magic herself. If your blood confirms Peverell and Black descent, the Black estate becomes yours regardless of what the Ministry thinks about it. Then let's confirm it." Ragnar reached into a drawer and produced a shallow stone basin, very old, carved with runes that pulsed with a dim red light. Beside it, he placed a silver knife. 3 drops of blood into the basin. The inheritance stone will read your lineage and confirm or deny your claim to each house. Harry picked up the knife. It was sharper than it looked, the blade parted his skin before he even felt pressure, and 3 drops of blood fell into the basin like rubies dropped into milk. The stone erupted. Light blazed upward from the basin, not red, not gold, but a color Harry didn't have a name for, something between starlight and shadow, a color that belonged to the spaces between life and death. The runes on the basin's surface began to glow, one after another, forming words in the air above the desk. Harry James Potter born, July 31, 1980. Blood status, half-blood father, James Charles Potter, deceased, heir of the House of Potter, descendant of Ignotus Peverell. Mother, Lily Potter née Evans, deceased, Muggleborn. Which paternal grandmother, Doria Potter née Black, daughter of Cygnus Black II. Confirmed heir, most ancient and noble House of Potter. Confirmed heir, most ancient and most noble House of Peverell. Confirmed heir, most ancient and noble House of Black, by blood right and marriage contract, superseding all other claims, additional title, Master of Death, Peverell Mantle, active, the last line pulsed. The light intensified until the entire office was bathed in that impossible color, and then it faded, and the basin went still, and the room was quiet. Ragnar stared at the floating text for a very long time. "Master of Death," he said. His voice was different now, lower, more careful, as if he were handling something fragile. Or explosive. The last confirmed Master of Death was Ignotus Peverell himself. That was in the 13th century. "I know. The Deathly Hallows. You have them?" "1 of 3. I'll have the rest soon." Ragnar sat back in his chair. He studied Harry with eyes that had seen centuries of human folly, greed, and ambition, and something in what he saw apparently satisfied him, because he nodded once, sharply, like a decision being made. The Goblin Nation has a long memory, Mr. Potter. We remember the Peverells. We remember what the Master of Death meant, in the old days, a keeper of balance, a bridge between worlds. We remember, even if the wizards have forgotten. He placed both hands flat on the desk. Gringotts will serve you. Not because we must, but because we choose to. The Peverell account is the oldest active account in this bank, and it will be managed with the full resources and attention of the director's office. Thank you, Director Ragnarok. Don't thank me. Pay me. A thin, sharp smile. Goblins are sentimental about only two things, gold and grudges. You now have a great deal of the former. I suggest you avoid giving us reason for the latter. Harry smiled back. Fair enough. I'd like to see the account summaries for all three vaults. What followed was 2 hours of numbers, and Harry discovered something interesting about himself. He was very, very good with numbers. The Dursleys had never noticed, because the Dursleys had never let him do anything more complex than count the silverware after dinner, but Harry's mind latched onto the financial data like a hawk onto a rabbit. The Potter Vault held approximately 300,000 galleons, plus a number of family heirlooms, books, and artifacts. Comfortable wealth. Upper class by wizarding standards. The Black Vault was larger, nearly 1 million galleons, plus extensive investments in magical businesses, real estate across Britain and France, and a collection of dark artifacts that Ragnarok described, with professional neutrality, as historically significant. The Peverell Vault was something else entirely. 14 million galleons, Ragnarok said. Plus precious metals, gemstones, and magical artifacts accumulated over 7 centuries of compounding interest and careful goblin investment. The Peverell estate also holds the deeds to 17 properties across Europe, including the manor in Cornwall where I assume you are currently residing. Harry stared at the number on the parchment. 14 million. He'd never had pocket money. He'd worn Dudley's cast-offs and eaten scraps and slept in a cupboard, and the whole time, 14 million galleons had been sitting in a vault with his name on it. He didn't feel angry. He felt something colder and more useful than anger. He felt focused. I want to set up a few things, Harry said. First, I want a full audit of any withdrawals, transfers, or access attempts on the Potter Vault since my parents died. Who touched it, when, and why? Ragnarok's eyes gleamed. That can be arranged. Immediately. Second, I want the Black estate fully transferred to my control. Every property, every vault, every investment. If there are any existing claims or challenges, I want them documented. There will be challenges. The Malfoy family, through Narcissa Malfoy née Black, will almost certainly protest. The Lestranges, through Bellatrix Lestrange née Black, may also, let them protest. The marriage contract is older than their family lines. They can challenge blood magic if they want, but I suspect they know better. They do, Ragnarok said, with something close to delight. They absolutely do. Third, and this is important, I want everything relating to Sirius Black's legal situation. His arrest records, the charges against him, his sentencing documents. If there was a trial, I want the transcript. If there wasn't, I want proof. Ragnarok's smile had an edge. There was no trial. The goblins have known this for years. We attempted to raise the issue when Arcturus Black died, as his will required Sirius to inherit. The ministry refused to engage. Then they refused to follow wizarding law. They did. Good, Harry said. I want documentation of that refusal. Notarized by Gringotts. You're building a legal case. I'm building a battering ram. Ragnarok leaned forward. Mr. Potter. Harry. May I offer a piece of advice? Please. The wizarding world is controlled by a small number of powerful individuals who have grown comfortable in their power. Dumbledore controls Hogwarts and the Wizengamot. The old pureblood families control the ministry through gold and influence. Cornelius Fudge, the current minister, is a puppet who dances for whoever pulls his strings most recently. When they learn that a 9-year-old boy has claimed 3 of the most powerful houses in Wizarding Britain, they will react. Some will try to control you. Some will try to use you. Some will try to destroy you. He paused. And when they learn what you truly are, the master of death, some of them will be very, very afraid. Good, Harry said again. Ragnox sat back. I believe we are going to have a very productive relationship, Mr. Potter. They shook hands. The goblin's grip was dry and strong and carried the weight of a promise. Harry left Ragnox's office with a moleskin pouch tied to his belt, a bottomless bag connected directly to his vaults, allowing him to withdraw gold at will, and a stack of documents that included his account summaries, property deeds, and a preliminary report on the Potter vault that already showed some interesting irregularities. Dumbledore, Death murmured, as Harry walked back through the bank's corridors. He's been accessing your vault. Harry didn't break stride. How much? Small amounts. Nothing that would register as theft, a few hundred galleons a year, routed through an educational trust he established in your name without your consent. The money went to Hogwarts. He's been stealing from an orphan to fund his school. He would call it managing your assets for your benefit. The distinction is largely philosophical. The distinction is the difference between a guardian and a thief. Harry emerged from the depths of Gringotts into the main hall. The cathedral of marble and gold stretched around him, and the goblins at their counters watched him pass with eyes that had gone from indifferent to attentive. Word had already spread through the bank. The tellers knew. The guards knew. By nightfall, every goblin in Gringotts would know that the Peverell heir had returned. He stepped out onto the front steps and paused, blinking in the autumn sunlight. Diagon Alley was still its bright, chaotic self. Witches argued over the price of bat spleens. A group of teenagers pressed their faces against the window of quality Quidditch supplies. An old wizard with a long beard was trying to wrangle a particularly uncooperative owl. Harry stood on the steps of the most powerful bank in the magical world and thought about what to do next. The wand, Death said. Or the stone. The stone first, Harry said. The wand is with Dumbledore, and I'd rather deal with him once, not twice. If I have the stone before I confront him, I'll have 2 of 3. That's a stronger position. Strategically sound. The stone is in the Gaunt Shack, in Little Hangleton. The shack is abandoned and has been since the Gaunt family's extinction. It will be warded, cursed, and thoroughly unpleasant. And the Horcrux? The ring. Riddle placed a compulsion on it, anyone who touches it will be driven to put the ring on, which activates a lethal curse. A withering curse, specifically. It would kill a normal wizard within a year. Good thing I'm not a normal wizard. No. You are the Lord of Death. A withering curse is an inconvenience, not a threat. But the Horcrux itself is another matter. It will resist you. It will fight. The fragment of Riddle's soul in that ring is larger and more entrenched than the one in your scar. But I can still destroy it. You can destroy anything, Harry. That's rather the point. Harry walked down the steps of Gringotts and turned left, away from the main flow of alley traffic, into a narrow side street that was quieter and less populated. He ducked behind a stack of empty cauldrons outside a supply shop, checked that no one was watching, and closed his eyes. Little Hangleton. A village in the English countryside. A shack on the outskirts, hidden behind overgrown hedges and years of neglect. He could feel it. The same way he'd felt the Peverell estate from Privet Drive, a pull, a resonance, the stone calling out to its master across the miles. It was faint, distorted by the corruption of the Horcrux, but it was there. A heartbeat in the dark. Harry stepped. The world folded around him like a closing fist, and when it opened again, he was standing in a patch of weeds in front of the most miserable building he had ever seen. The Gaunt Shack was barely a shack. It was a ruin, 4 walls of rotting wood, a roof that had given up any pretense of keeping out the rain, and a door that hung from one hinge like a broken jaw. The windows were dark and empty. The yard, if you could call it that, was a tangle of dead grass and rusted junk, old pots, broken bottles, what might have been a cartwheel. The air was wrong. That was the first thing Harry noticed. The air around the shack was thick and heavy and smelled like something between copper and decay, and the magic saturating the place was dark, genuinely, aggressively dark, in a way that pressed against Harry's senses like a hand trying to cover his mouth. Wards. Layered, vicious, and designed to kill. How many? Harry murmured. 7 layers. Anti-muggle repulsion. A confundus field for wizards. A proximity curse that triggers paralysis. A secondary curse that induces terror. A third curse that attacks the nervous system directly. A ward against magical detection. And, at the very center, a localized anti-apparition field to prevent escape. He really didn't want anyone finding this. Tom Riddle was many things, but careless was not one of them. These wards would stop any witch or wizard in Britain. Dumbledore himself would need hours to dismantle them safely. Harry looked at the shack. He looked at the wards, he could see them now, shimmering like heat haze in the air around the building, layers of dark magic stacked one on top of another like sheets of poisoned glass. He raised one hand. The wards shattered. Not unraveled. Not dismantled. Shattered, all 7 layers at once, crumbling like spun sugar in a rainstorm. The dark magic dispersed into the air with a sound like breaking ice, and the oppressive weight lifted, and the shack sat there in the watery autumn sunlight looking exactly like what it was, a sad, empty ruin where a miserable family had lived miserable lives. Harry walked through the broken door. Inside, the shack was one room. Dirt floor. A fireplace choked with ash. A table, a chair, and the remnants of a life lived in squalor and resentment. On the table, or rather, half buried in the grime on the table, was a small box of tarnished silver. Harry opened the box. The ring was inside. A gold band set with a black stone, cracked down the middle, as if someone had struck it with a blade, and engraved on the band was the same triangular symbol that marked the Peverell trunk. The Deathly Hallows mark. The Resurrection Stone. The Horcrux hit him immediately. It was like stepping into freezing water. Cold, sudden, and total, a wave of dark magic that crashed over him and tried to sink its hooks into his mind. He felt it probing, searching, looking for weaknesses, fear, anger, doubt, loneliness, anything it could exploit, any crack in his defenses it could widen and slip through. And behind the cold, he could feel it. The fragment of Tom Riddle's soul. Larger than the one in his scar, as death had warned. This one was aware. This one was angry. It pressed against his consciousness like a face behind a fogged window, and he could feel its malice, its desperation, its absolute refusal to be destroyed. Put the ring on, something whispered. Not death, something else. Something that sounded like his own voice but wrong, like hearing a recording of yourself played backward. Put it on and see them again. Your parents. They're right there, just beyond the veil. All you have to do is put on the ring and you can see them. Talk to them. Hold them. Harry looked at the ring. Nice try, he said. He reached into the box and picked up the ring, and the withering curse activated instantly, a blast of dark magic that raced up his arm like black fire, trying to rot his flesh, trying to consume his life force and feed it to the Horcrux. It got about as far as his wrist before it stopped. Harry watched the dark magic swirl around his hand, pressing against his skin, trying to find a way in. It was like watching a river try to flow uphill. The power of the Lord of Death sat in his bones like bedrock, and the curse broke against it and dissolved into nothing. The Horcrux screamed. Not a sound anyone else could hear, a psychic scream, a howl of fury and terror that echoed through the magical spectrum like a bell being struck with a hammer. The fragment of Riddle's soul knew what he was. It could feel the mantle of the Master of Death, and it was afraid, because this was the one thing it could not escape, the one power it could not cheat or trick or overpower. "You're a piece of a coward's soul," Harry told it, holding the ring up to eye level. "You're a fragment of a man who was so afraid of what I am that he tore himself apart to hide from it. And now here you are, in the palm of my hand." The face behind the fogged window pressed harder. Features resolved, young, handsome, twisted with rage. Tom Riddle as he'd been when he made this Horcrux. A teenage boy playing at immortality. "You don't know what you're doing," the fragment hissed. "You're a child. A fool. You think power makes you safe? Power makes you a target. They'll come for you, all of them, and when they do, goodbye, Tom." Harry closed his hand around the ring and squeezed, not physically, but with the power that lived in the center of him, the authority of the Lord of Death brought to bear on a single point, a single fragment of stolen immortality. The Horcrux didn't shatter this time. It burned. Black fire erupted from the ring, cold and silent, and the fragment of Riddle's soul writhed and screamed and then went still and then was gone, pulled through the veil by a force it had spent decades trying to escape. The ring cooled in Harry's hand. The black fire died. The resurrection stone, cracked and ancient, sat in its gold setting and pulsed once, a single beat, like a heart remembering how to work after a long sleep. And then it spoke. Not in words, exactly, more in impressions, feelings, images. Welcome. Recognition. Finally. Harry slid the ring onto his finger. It resized instantly, shrinking to fit, and the crack in the stone sealed itself, the surface becoming smooth and whole as if it had never been damaged. 2 hallows. 1 to go. "Well done," Death said, and there was something in its voice that went beyond approval, a resonance, a harmonic, as if a chord that had been missing a note for 7 centuries had just been completed. "The stone is yours. You can feel it, can't you? The veil is thinner now. The dead are closer." Harry could feel it. A whisper at the edge of his perception, like hearing a conversation in another room through a closed door. He couldn't make out words yet, but he knew they were there, the dead, the vast uncounted dead, all of them on the other side of a curtain he could now reach out and touch. He could call them back. Not truly, not to life, not to flesh and blood, but to the space between, where the living and the dead could speak. The stone could do that. That was its purpose, its gift and its burden, and Harry felt the weight of it settle onto his shoulders like a second cloak. He didn't call anyone. Not yet. There would be time for that later, time to call his parents, to hear their voices, to ask them everything he'd never been able to ask. But not now. Now, there was work to do. Harry stepped out of the gaunt shack and back into the sunlight, the ring warm on his finger, the cloak folded inside his jacket, and the vast, quiet power of 2 hallows thrumming in his chest like a second heartbeat. One more. The Elder Wand. And that meant Dumbledore. He stepped back to Cornwall. The Peverell estate welcomed him like a living thing, the wards parting, the door swinging open, the fire roaring to life in the study hearth. Mipsy appeared instantly with tea and sandwiches and a look of profound relief, as if she'd been convinced he'd vanished forever in the hours he'd been gone. "Master Harry is back." Mipsy was worried. Mipsy was very, very worried. "I'm fine, Mipsy. I promise." She set the tray down and her eyes caught the ring on his finger. Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "Is that, the resurrection stone?" "Yes." Mipsy sat down very slowly on the nearest chair, which was 3 times too big for her and made her look like a child. "Master Harry," she said, in a voice that was trying very hard to be calm. "How many of the Deathly Hallows does Master Harry now possess?" 2 of 3. "And the third?" "I'm working on it." Mipsy nodded very carefully, climbed down from the chair, picked up the tea tray, set it down, picked it up again, put it back, and then said, "Mipsy needs to go polish something," and vanished. Harry sat in the study and thought about Albus Dumbledore. "You are being very quiet," Death observed. "I'm thinking. About how to approach Dumbledore. About whether to approach him at all. He has the wand. The wand is mine. But taking it by force creates an enemy I don't need, and Dumbledore isn't Voldemort, he's not evil. He's just, controlling. Controlling. And he thinks he knows best. People like that are more dangerous than people who are actually malicious, because they genuinely believe they're doing the right thing." An astute observation for a 9-year-old. I've had a lot of time to watch adults. Uncle Vernon was easy to understand. He was angry and scared and stupid, and angry scared stupid people are predictable. Aunt Petunia was harder, because she was angry and scared and smart, which made her cruel in more sophisticated ways. But the most dangerous person I ever met was Mrs. Whitfield, my Year 3 teacher. A primary school teacher. She cared about us. Genuinely cared. Wanted the best for every child in her class. And because she cared, she thought she had the right to decide what was best for us. She moved kids around, separated friends, assigned partners, controlled every interaction, all because she believed she was helping. The kids who pushed back got punished, not harshly, just, consistently. Until they stopped pushing back. Harry paused. That's Dumbledore, isn't it? He cares. He genuinely wants to protect people. And that makes him believe he has the right to arrange people's lives like pieces on a chessboard. Yes. That is Dumbledore exactly. So I don't fight him. Not yet. I go to him. I let him see what I am. And I give him a choice, work with me, or get out of my way. But I don't hide, and I don't pretend to be less than I am, because the moment I do that, he'll think he can manage me. And if he refuses to work with you? Harry looked at the ring on his finger. The wand's loyalty is already shifting. I can feel it, the way I can feel the cloak and the stone. It knows its master. It's been waiting, just like the others. When I stand in front of Dumbledore, the wand will have to choose. And it will choose me. You sound very certain. I am certain. The Hallows are mine by blood, by right, and by magic. Dumbledore won the wand from Grindelwald through combat, and it served him because there was no one with a stronger claim. But I don't need to beat him in a duel. I just need to be in the same room. The wand will come home. Harry finished his tea and stood. Through the tower windows, the afternoon sun was painting the sea in shades of copper and rose. He had maybe 3 hours of daylight left. Where is Dumbledore right now? Hogwarts. In his office. It is a Saturday, he will be there all day, managing correspondence and irritating his staff. Then I'm going to Hogwarts. Now. Now. You are aware that Hogwarts is the most heavily warded location in Britain. That no one can apparate or step directly into the castle. That Dumbledore controls the wards personally. I'm aware. And you're going anyway. I'm going anyway. Death was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, good. Harry changed his jacket, the one he was wearing had stone dust from the gaunt shack on it, and checked his reflection in the mirror. Small. Thin. 9 years old. Green eyes that held something ancient and steady behind round glasses. He looked like a child going to visit his headmaster. He felt like a king going to reclaim his crown. He stepped to the gates of Hogwarts. The castle rose above him like a mountain that had decided to become architecture. Towers and turrets and battlements sprawled across the Scottish Highland, vast and ancient and so saturated with magic that the air practically sparkled. The gates were wrought iron, tall and imposing, flanked by pillars topped with winged boars. Harry stood at the gates and looked up at the castle and felt something stir in his chest, not the power of the Hallows, but something simpler and more complicated. Awe. Wonder. The pure, uncomplicated amazement of a child seeing something magnificent for the first time. This was where his parents had gone to school. Where they'd met. Where they'd fallen in love and learned magic and become the people who would one day die to save him. He let himself feel it. Then he pushed through the gates. The wards pressed against him, heavy, layered, old, and he felt them trying to identify him, categorize him, determine whether he was a threat. They were keyed to Dumbledore's will, and Dumbledore hadn't authorized his entry. Harry didn't fight the wards. He didn't need to. The Hallows resonated, and the castle, which was older than Dumbledore, older than most things in Wizarding Britain, recognized the resonance. Hogwarts had been built in an age when the Lord of Death was a known quantity, a respected power, and its wards had been designed with an exception for exactly this circumstance. The wards parted. Not broken, parted, like curtains drawn aside for someone important. Harry walked up the path to the front doors. The grounds were quiet, it was a Saturday afternoon, and most students were either in Hogsmeade or lounging around the common rooms. A few figures moved in the distance, but no one was close enough to notice a small, dark-haired boy walking up from the gates with the calm assurance of someone who belonged there. The front doors opened at his touch. The entrance hall was vast and echoing, all stone and candlelight and the distant murmur of hundreds of magical portraits chatting in their frames. Harry's footsteps rang against the flagstone floor. He knew where to go. Not because anyone had told him, but because the castle itself was guiding him, subtle shifts in the magic, a warmth in the walls when he turned the right way, a coolness when he turned wrong. Hogwarts was helping him find the headmaster's office, and there was something almost conspiratorial about it, as if the castle was enjoying the upcoming confrontation. He climbed stairs. He walked corridors. Portraits turned to watch him pass, and their whispers followed him like a trail of sparks. Who is that boy? Is that a student? He's too young. Look at his eyes. Could that be? He reached a gargoyle. Stone, ugly, and blocking a spiral staircase with the bureaucratic certainty of something that takes its job very seriously. Password, the gargoyle said. I don't have one, Harry said. But you're going to let me up anyway. No password, no entry. Those are the rules. Harry looked at the gargoyle. The gargoyle looked at Harry. Behind the stone face, there was magic, old enchantment, keyed to the headmaster's authority. Harry reached out, not with his hand but with the Peverell magic, the ancient and fundamental power that predated Hogwarts and everything in it, and he touched the enchantment the way you touch a friend's shoulder to get their attention. The gargoyle flinched. Its stone eyes widened. And then, very slowly, it stepped aside. Right. Yes. Go on up, then. Harry climbed the spiral staircase and stopped in front of a heavy oak door. He could feel Dumbledore on the other side, a massive, complex magical presence, like a star seen through a telescope, blazing with power and intelligence and the weight of over a century of accumulated knowledge. And he could feel the wand. It was there. Right there. Humming with power, singing with it, and the moment Harry's presence registered, the song changed. It had been playing for Dumbledore for 50 years, a steady, loyal tune, but now a new note entered, a higher, clearer note, a note of recognition and longing and the absolute certainty of coming home. Harry knocked. Enter, said a voice from inside. Mild, pleasant, grandfatherly. The voice of a man who expected to be in control of every situation he found himself in. Harry opened the door. The headmaster's office was circular and cluttered and extraordinary. Silver instruments whirred and puffed on spindle-legged tables. Portraits of previous headmasters and headmistresses lined the walls, most of them pretending to be asleep. A phoenix, actual, living phoenix, sat on a golden perch near the desk, its plumage blazing like a sunset. And behind the desk, in a high-backed chair, sat Albus Dumbledore. He was exactly what Harry had expected and nothing like what he'd imagined. Old, impossibly old, with a long silver beard and half-moon spectacles and robes of midnight blue scattered with golden stars. His eyes were bright and sharp and twinkling behind the glasses, and they were already fixed on Harry with an expression of utter, carefully masked astonishment. "Well," Dumbledore said, after a pause that lasted about 3 heartbeats too long. "This is unexpected." "Professor Dumbledore," Harry said. "Harry Potter." Dumbledore's eyes moved over him, quick, assessing, missing nothing. The scar. The glasses. The clothes that were too well made for an orphan from Privet Drive. The ring on his finger. "I was under the impression you were living with your aunt and uncle in Surrey." "I was. I'm not anymore." "I see." Dumbledore's voice remained perfectly mild, but something shifted behind his eyes, a calculation, a rapid reassessment. "May I ask how you came to be here?" "Hogwarts wards should have, the wards let me through." "So did the gargoyle." Harry stepped further into the office and sat down in the chair across from Dumbledore's desk without being invited. "We need to talk." Dumbledore studied him. The twinkle in his eyes was still there, but it had hardened. Less benevolent grandfather, more grandmaster evaluating an unexpected piece on the board. "By all means," he said. "Tea?" "No, thank you." Dumbledore waved his hand and a teapot poured for him anyway. He took a sip and regarded Harry over the rim of his cup with an expression of gentle curiosity that Harry didn't believe for a second. "You left the Dursleys," Dumbledore said. "Yes. The protections I placed there, blood wards powered by a mother's sacrifice. They were failing anyway. There's not enough love in that house to keep a candle lit, let alone ancient protective magic." Dumbledore set down his teacup. "You know about the blood wards." "I know about a lot of things, Professor. I know about the wards. I know about the Philosopher's Stone you've hidden in this castle. I know about the Horcruxes. I know about Sirius Black." The office went very still. The silver instruments stopped whirring. The portraits stopped pretending to sleep and were now openly staring. Even the phoenix had gone rigid, its burning eyes fixed on Harry. Dumbledore's face didn't change, but something behind it did, a tightening, a sharpening, as if the gentle old man was being packed away and something much more formidable was rising to the surface. "You are 9 years old," Dumbledore said quietly. "Yes. And you know about Horcruxes?" "I had one in my scar." Harry watched Dumbledore's face very carefully. "Did you know about that, Professor?" The silence that followed was the loudest thing Harry had ever heard. Dumbledore's hands, folded on the desk, didn't move. His expression didn't change. But his eyes, those bright, twinkling, calculating eyes, flickered. Just for an instant. A flash of something that might have been guilt, quickly suppressed. "I suspected," Dumbledore said. "You suspected that a fragment of Voldemort's soul was lodged in the scar of a baby, and you placed that baby with muggles who hated him, in a house with no magical support, no monitoring, and no one to explain what was happening to him. You suspected, and you did nothing. The situation was that you had a child who needed help and you put him in a cupboard because it was convenient for your plans." Harry's voice was steady. Level. Not angry, something beyond anger, something that had passed through anger and come out the other side into a cold, clear certainty. "I'm not here to argue about it. What's done is done. I removed the Horcrux myself. It's gone." Dumbledore's composure cracked. Not dramatically, the man had over a century of practice at keeping his face under control, but enough. His eyebrows rose. His lips parted. Behind his glasses, his eyes went wide with genuine, unguarded shock. "You removed it. Yesterday. That should be impossible. The soul fragment was embedded in your very scar, intertwined with your mother's protective magic. To remove it without destroying yourself would require power over death itself," Harry finished. "Yes." He raised his right hand and showed Dumbledore the ring. The resurrection stone caught the light and glowed with a soft, dark luminance that had nothing to do with reflected light. Dumbledore stared at the ring. His face went white. Not pale, white, the color of someone who has just been confronted with something they have spent their entire life dreaming of and dreading in equal measure. His hands gripped the edge of the desk, and for the first time since Harry had entered the office, Albus Dumbledore looked his age. "The resurrection stone," he whispered. "Cleaned of its Horcrux. The gaunt ring was another of Riddle's anchors. It isn't anymore." "How, where did you?" Dumbledore caught himself. Drew a breath. Straightened in his chair. The mask slid back into place, but it was thinner now, and the cracks were showing. "Harry. I need you to tell me exactly what has happened. I found the Peverell-Black marriage contract. My blood activated it. I am the heir of both houses, confirmed by blood right and goblin inheritance ritual." Harry paused to let that land, then continued. "I am the Lord of Death, Professor. The cloak was already mine, my father's cloak, left in a trunk by my mother. The stone I claimed today. Which brings us to the third Hallow." Harry's eyes moved to Dumbledore's right hand. To the wand resting beside it on the desk. 15 inches. Elder wood. Thestral tail hair core. The most powerful wand ever made. The Death Stick. The Wand of Destiny. The Elder Wand. It was shaking. Not Dumbledore's hand, the wand. It was vibrating on the desktop, a fine tremor that grew stronger as Harry looked at it, rattling against the wood with a sound like chattering teeth. The Elder Wand was trying to move. Trying to go to Harry. Trying to go home. Dumbledore looked down at the wand. Then at Harry. And in that moment, Harry saw something he hadn't expected to see in the eyes of the most powerful wizard in Britain. Fear. Not fear of Harry, not exactly. Fear of what Harry represented. Fear of the thing Dumbledore had wanted more than anything in his youth, the power he had spent a lifetime convincing himself he didn't want, standing in front of him in the form of a 9-year-old boy with his mother's eyes and a destiny that made Dumbledore's entire life's work look like a rehearsal. "The wand is mine," Harry said. Not aggressive. Not threatening. Just stating a fact, the way you'd state that the sky was blue or that water was wet. You won it from Grindelwald, and it served you well. But its allegiance was always to the Master of Death, and the Master of Death is here. The Elder Wand lurched off the desk. Dumbledore grabbed for it, reflex, instinct, 50 years of habit, and for a moment, his fingers closed around the shaft, and the two of them were frozen there, the old wizard clutching his wand and the boy sitting calmly across from him. Then the wand pulsed, once, with a light so bright it bleached the color from the room, and Dumbledore's hand opened. Not forced open. Simply, opened. As if his fingers had recognized, on a level deeper than conscious thought, that they were holding something that didn't belong to them. The Elder Wand drifted across the desk and settled into Harry's hand. The moment it touched his skin, the world shifted. Harry felt the three Hallows connect, cloak, stone, and wand, and the mantle of the Master of Death, which had been settling onto him in pieces, completed itself. Power flooded through him, not like a wave but like a tide, vast and unstoppable and utterly, cosmically right. The air in the office changed. The light changed. The portraits gasped. The Phoenix let out a single, piercing note that sounded like grief and triumph and the end of something old and the beginning of something new. And Death stood behind Harry's chair, visible for the first time to someone other than its master. Dumbledore saw it. Harry knew he saw it because the blood drained from his face completely, and his hands gripped the armrests of his chair, and his mouth formed a single word without making a sound. Please. Death did not speak. It simply stood there, a shadow with presence, a silence with weight, and looked at Albus Dumbledore the way a creditor looks at a man who has been running up a tab for a very, very long time. Then it faded, and the office returned to normal, and Dumbledore sat behind his desk looking like a man who had just aged another 10 years. Well, Harry said, turning the Elder Wand over in his hands. It was warm, humming with contained power, and it fit his grip as if it had been carved for him, which, in a sense, it had. That's all three. Dumbledore said nothing. He was staring at the spot where death had stood, his blue eyes distant and haunted. Ariana, he whispered. Harry's hand tightened on the wand. He hadn't expected that, hadn't expected Dumbledore's first response to seeing death to be the name of his dead sister. It was a reminder, sharp and unwelcome, that the man sitting across from him was not a villain. He was a person. A flawed, brilliant, manipulative person who had done terrible things for what he believed were the right reasons, and who carried the weight of his worst failure like a stone around his neck. I'm not here to punish you, Harry said quietly. I'm not here to take revenge for 9 years in a cupboard, or for the Horcrux you suspected and didn't remove, or for Sirius Black rotting in Azkaban without a trial while you sat in this office and did nothing. I could be angry about all of that. I probably should be. But anger is a luxury I can't afford right now, and honestly, I think you've punished yourself enough. Dumbledore blinked. His eyes refocused, and he looked at Harry, really looked, not assessing or calculating but seeing, and something in his expression shifted. You are not what I expected, he said. You expected the boy who lived. A weapon in a cupboard, kept ignorant and grateful, ready to be aimed at Voldemort when the time came. Dumbledore flinched. Actually flinched. That is a harsher characterization than you would use. I'm sure. You'd use gentler words. You talk about protection and sacrifice and the greater good. Harry leaned forward. But here's what I need you to understand, Professor. I am not your weapon. I am not your student. I am not a piece on your chessboard. I am the Lord of Death, and I am 9 years old, and I am going to fix the things that are broken in this world, starting with the innocent man you let rot in Azkaban. The silence after that was absolute. Even the portraits were holding their breath. Dumbledore removed his glasses and cleaned them on his robes. It was a very human gesture, and it bought him time, and when he put them back on, he looked calmer. More like himself. The twinkle was gone, replaced by something more honest, a sharp, weary intelligence that was done pretending. Sirius Black, he said. Never had a trial. You were Chief Warlock. You could have demanded one. I believed he was guilty. You believed it was convenient for him to be guilty. If Sirius was free, he'd have claimed me as my godfather and taken me away from the Dursleys, and your blood wards and your carefully controlled upbringing would have fallen apart. Dumbledore was quiet for a very long time. You may be right, he said at last. I told myself many things. I told myself it was for the best. I told myself the blood protection was paramount, that nothing else mattered as long as you were alive and safe when the time came. I told myself, that the greater good justified the choices you made. Yes. It didn't. No, Dumbledore said. I am beginning to see that it didn't. Harry stood. The Elder Wand rested in his right hand, and the resurrection stone glowed on his finger, and the cloak was a warm weight against his chest, and he felt, not invincible, because invincibility was a lie that people told themselves to avoid dealing with consequences, but complete. Whole. The way a river feels when it reaches the sea. I'm going to get Sirius Black a trial, Harry said. I'm going to present evidence to the Wizengamot that he was imprisoned without due process, and I'm going to demand that he be given Veritaserum and allowed to testify. If he's guilty, he goes back to Azkaban and I'll accept it. If he's innocent, he goes free and the people who put him there answer for it. The Ministry will resist. The Ministry can try. Cornelius Fudge is weak, but the people behind him are not. Lucius Malfoy, in particular, has significant influence and will not welcome a challenge to the established order. Lucius Malfoy is a Death Eater who bought his way out of Azkaban by claiming the Imperius Curse and donating to the right charities. I have the Black family records. I know exactly how much gold the Malfoys have funneled through the Black accounts to pay off Ministry officials. If he wants to challenge me, I will destroy him financially before he can draw his wand. Dumbledore stared at him. "You've been awake for 2 days," he said. "You are 9 years old. And you have already dismantled 2 Horcruxes, claimed the Deathly Hallows, accessed 3 Gringotts vaults, and compiled financial intelligence on one of the most powerful families in Wizarding Britain. I'm a fast learner." "Evidently." Harry walked to the door, then turned back. "One more thing. The Philosopher's Stone. The one you've hidden in this castle, behind a series of protections that a talented first year could bypass." Dumbledore's hand went to where his wand should have been, then stopped. "It's bait," Harry said. "You're using it to lure Voldemort, or whatever's left of him, out of hiding. You know he wants it. You know he'll send someone after it. And you've placed it in a school full of children. The protections are a challenge, not a barrier. You designed them to be passed. You want someone to try." Harry shook his head. "Return the stone to Nicholas Flamel. Whatever trap you're planning, plan it somewhere that doesn't put 11-year-olds in the crossfire." He didn't wait for a response. He walked out of the office, down the spiral staircase, past the gargoyle, which pressed itself against the wall as he passed, and through the corridors of Hogwarts. The castle hummed around him. Warm. Welcoming. The portraits whispered and the staircases rearranged themselves to give him the most direct route, and by the time he reached the front doors, the sun was setting over the Scottish Highlands and the sky was on fire. Harry stood on the steps of Hogwarts and breathed. He was tired. Not the exhaustion of his old life, the hollowed-out, hopeless tired of a child who doesn't get enough food or sleep or love, but a clean tiredness, the kind you feel after a long day of hard work that matters. The kind of tired that leads to good sleep and a better tomorrow. "You did well," Death said. "He's going to fight me. Eventually. He cannot help himself. Control is his addiction, and you have just demonstrated that you cannot be controlled. He will smile and agree and then he will begin planning, because that is what Albus Dumbledore does. I know. That's why I took the wand. Without it, he's still the most powerful wizard in Britain, but he's not untouchable anymore. He knows that. And knowing it will make him careful. You showed him mercy. The wand, the stone, the knowledge of what he'd done to you, you could have destroyed him. Politically, personally, magically. You chose not to. Mercy isn't weakness. It's strategy. A broken Dumbledore is useless. A humbled Dumbledore might actually be helpful. And if he isn't? Harry looked out over the grounds of Hogwarts, the lake, black and mirror-smooth, the forest, dark and ancient, the mountains rising beyond like sleeping giants, and the elder wand hummed in his hand, and the stone pulsed on his finger, and the cloak whispered against his chest. "Then I'll deal with it," he said. "But I'd rather have an ally than an enemy. There are 5 more Horcruxes out there. Voldemort is still alive, somewhere, clinging to existence. Sirius Black is innocent and suffering. The Ministry is corrupt. The magical world is broken in 100 different ways, and I'm 9 years old, and even the Lord of Death can't fix everything alone. You won't be alone. You never were." Harry smiled. It was a tired smile, but a real one, and it reached his eyes. He stepped home. The Peverell estate rose from the cliff top in the last light of day, and the sea roared below, and the wind carried the smell of salt and rain and the first whisper of winter. Mipsy had dinner waiting, a massive spread that could have fed a family of 10, because Mipsy had apparently decided that her primary mission in life was to ensure Harry was never hungry again. He ate. He bathed in a bathroom that was larger than his old cupboard and had water that adjusted its own temperature. He changed into pajamas and climbed into the enormous bed in the tower room. The 3 Hallows rested on the bedside table, wand, stone, and cloak, and they glowed softly in the darkness, 3 points of light in the shape of a triangle. Harry lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and listened to the sea and felt, for the second night of his life, the complete absence of fear and the absolute presence of purpose. Tomorrow, he would begin the fight for Sirius Black. Tomorrow, he would start hunting Horcruxes. Tomorrow, the wizarding world would learn that the Lord of Death was not a myth, not a fairy tale, not a children's story. He was a 9-year-old boy with green eyes and a lightning bolt scar and the power of the boundary between life and death running through his veins. And he was just getting started. Harry closed his eyes. Sleep came fast, deep, and dreamless. And in the shadows of the tower room, death stood watch, patient and eternal, guarding its master's rest with the quiet devotion of something that had waited 700 years for this moment and intended to make every remaining moment count. Chapter 3, The world bows to no king, but it remembers the Lord. Harry woke before dawn to the sound of the sea and the smell of bacon. Mipsy had outdone herself. The breakfast tray waiting in the study held enough food for a small army: eggs scrambled and fried and poached, bacon and sausages, toast with 3 kinds of jam, a full pot of tea, fresh orange juice, a bowl of fruit, and something that appeared to be a miniature cake with the words, "Good luck, Master Harry," piped on top in wobbly pink frosting. Harry ate the cake first, because he was 9 and because life was too short for saving dessert. He was halfway through the eggs when the first owl arrived. It swooped through the study window, which Harry hadn't opened, but which apparently opened for owls, because magic, and dropped a thick envelope on the desk before wheeling around and vanishing back into the grey morning. The envelope was heavy cream parchment, sealed with purple wax stamped with a large M. The Ministry of Magic. Harry wiped his hands, cracked the seal, and read. Dear Mr. Potter, it has come to the attention of the Ministry of Magic that you have vacated your registered place of residence at number 4, Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. As you are a minor under the guardianship of your maternal relatives, the Dursley family, this constitutes an unauthorized absence and may be in violation of. He stopped reading. That was fast, he said. Dumbledore, Death said from the corner. He notified them last night. He may have agreed with your points in person, but he moved against you the moment you left his office. Predictable. He's trying to get me back under control. Put me back with the Dursleys, re-establish the blood wards, pretend last night didn't happen. Will you respond? Harry folded the letter, tucked it into the breast pocket of his jacket, and finished his eggs. Oh yes. But not the way they're expecting. A second owl arrived. Then a third. The second carried a letter from Gringotts, Ragnarok, confirming that the full audit of the Potter Vault was complete and the results were illuminating. The third carried a smaller envelope with no seal, just a name written in a spidery, rushed hand, Harry Potter, urgent. Harry opened the third letter. Mr. Potter, my name is Andromeda Tonks, née Black. I was informed this morning by Gringotts that a new head of the House of Black has been confirmed by blood right. I confess I nearly dropped my tea. I was disowned from the Black family 30 years ago for marrying a Muggle-born wizard. I have no claim to the Black fortune and want none. But I have information you may find useful regarding Sirius Black, who is my cousin and who I believe to be innocent of the crimes for which he was imprisoned. If you are willing to meet, I can be reached at the address below. I would suggest sooner rather than later. The Ministry has ears everywhere, and if you intend to challenge Sirius's conviction, there are people who will move quickly to prevent it. Sincerely, Andromeda Tonks. Harry read the letter twice. Then he looked at Death. What do you know about Andromeda Tonks? Daughter of Cygnus Black III. Sister of Bellatrix Lestrange and Narcissa Malfoy. Married Ted Tonks, a Muggle-born, in 1971, and was burned off the family tapestry for it. She has one daughter, Nymphadora, who is currently training as an Auror. Andromeda is intelligent, principled, and has spent 30 years quietly hating everything the Black family stood for while remaining fiercely loyal to the members who deserved it. Is she trustworthy? More than most. Harry folded her letter and placed it beside Ragnarok's. 3 messages in one morning. The game was already in motion. He dressed carefully. Dark trousers, white shirt, the black jacket with the Peverell crest. The cloak folded inside the jacket, invisible. The stone on his right hand. The elder wand in a holster that had appeared in the wardrobe overnight, dragon hide, designed for a forearm draw, sized for a child's arm. He looked at himself in the mirror. A small, serious boy with messy black hair and green eyes and the weight of 3 ancient houses on his shoulders. Mipsy. She appeared instantly. Yes, Master Harry. I'm going to be busy today. Probably all day. There may be visitors. I'm going to ask Andromeda Tonks to come here. Can you prepare a sitting room? Already done, sir. Mipsy has prepared the west parlor. It has the best view of the sea, and Mipsy has put out the good tea set, the Peverell silver, not the everyday set, and there are scones, sir, fresh scones, because Mipsy read in a book that you should always offer scones to guests, Mipsy. That's perfect. Thank you. She beamed, bowed so low her nose touched the floor, and vanished. Harry wrote 2 letters. The first was to Andromeda Tonks. Mrs. Tonks, thank you for reaching out. I would very much like to meet. Please come to the Peverell estate in Cornwall at your earliest convenience. Mipsy, my house elf, will provide floor access. Bring everything you have regarding Sirius Black. Harry Potter, Lord of Houses Potter, Peverell, and Black. The second was to Ragnarok, Director Ragnarok, thank you for the audit results. Please prepare a full financial report on the Malfoy family's transactions through Black family accounts, including any payments to ministry officials. I will also need certified documentation of Sirius Black's imprisonment without trial, including the absence of any court records, sentencing documents, or formal charges. I intend to present this evidence to the Wizengamot today. Harry Potter. He gave both letters to the owls that were still lingering on the windowsill, apparently hoping for bacon scraps. He gave them the scraps too. Then he sat in the study and planned. The Wizengamot met in full session on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. He'd found this in a book in the Peverell Library called A Political History of Magical Britain, which he'd skimmed at 3 in the morning because sleep was for people who didn't have a wrongfully imprisoned godfather. Today was Monday. The session would begin at 10 o'clock. As lord of 3 ancient and noble houses, Harry held 3 seats on the Wizengamot. He could walk into that chamber and demand to be heard, and there was no legal mechanism to refuse him. The marriage contract, the blood confirmation, the goblin certification, it was all ironclad. The pureblood families who made up the Wizengamot might choke on their own outrage at a 9-year-old claiming lordship, but the magic was the magic, and magic didn't care about their feelings. The question was not whether he could get in. The question was what he would do once he was there. Andromeda Tonks arrived at 8:30. She stepped out of the flue in the west parlor and immediately inhaled sharply, because the Peverell estate had that effect on people. The view through the parlor windows was all cliff and sea and savage sky, and the magic in the walls was so old and deep it practically had a gravitational pull. Then she saw Harry, and she inhaled again, for different reasons. Andromeda Tonks was tall and elegant, with dark hair streaked with gray and the sharp, aristocratic features of the Black family softened by 30 years of choosing warmth over cruelty. Her eyes were brown, not the silver gray of her sisters, and they were shrewd and kind and currently very wide. You look like James, she said. Except the eyes. Those are lilies. So I'm told. Please sit down, Mrs. Tonks. Mipsy made scones. She sat. She took a scone. She did not eat it, because she was too busy staring at Harry with the expression of someone trying to reconcile what they'd expected with what they'd found. You're 9, she said. Everyone keeps mentioning that. I don't know what I expected. A child, certainly. But you don't, you're not, she stopped. Took a breath. You carry yourself like Arcturus. Like the old Lord Black. There's a weight to you that doesn't match your age. I've had an unusual week. She almost smiled. I imagine so. She set the scone down and folded her hands in her lap. I'll be direct, Mr. Potter. Harry. I'm here because Sirius Black is innocent, and I've known it for 13 years, and no one with the power to do anything about it has ever been willing to listen. I'm listening. Andromeda's composure cracked, just slightly. A tremor around the mouth, a brightness in the eyes. She gathered herself and spoke. Sirius was James Potter's best friend. You knew that? Yes. When your parents went into hiding, they used the Fidelius charm. It requires a secret keeper, one person who holds the secret of the hidden location. Everyone assumed Sirius was the secret keeper. He was James's closest friend, the obvious choice. But Sirius told me, before your parents went into hiding, he came to my house, and he told me they'd switched. He said he was too obvious, that Voldemort would come for him first, and they'd decided to use Peter Pettigrew instead. Peter Pettigrew. The one Sirius supposedly killed. The one Sirius supposedly blew up in the middle of a Muggle street, along with 12 bystanders. But Harry, think about it. Sirius was a trained Auror, brilliant, one of the most talented duelists of his generation. If he wanted to kill Peter Pettigrew, he wouldn't have done it in broad daylight in front of a dozen witnesses. He wouldn't have used a blasting curse in the middle of a crowd. That's not assassination, that's theater. Harry leaned forward. You think Pettigrew staged it? I think Pettigrew was the traitor. I think he was the secret keeper who betrayed your parents, and when Sirius tracked him down, Pettigrew blew up the street himself, cut off his own finger to leave behind as evidence, and escaped. How would he escape an explosion he caused? A blast that killed 12 people. Andromeda met his eyes. Pettigrew was an animagus. Unregistered. He could transform into a rat. The room was very quiet. The sea crashed against the cliffs below, distant and rhythmic. A rat, Harry said. A rat. He blows up the street, transforms, runs into the sewers. Leaves behind a finger and a pile of bodies and a best friend standing in the crater, laughing. Laughing? That's what the witnesses said. That Sirius was laughing when the Aurors arrived. Everyone took it as proof of his madness, his guilt. I think he was laughing because he'd been outplayed by the last person he ever expected. Peter Pettigrew, the weakest of their group, the one they'd all underestimated, had just framed him for murder and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. Harry sat back. The pieces fit. They fit with the ugly precision of something that had been designed to look exactly like what it wasn't. You told someone this, Harry said. You must have. I told Dumbledore. Her voice went hard. Cold. The Black family steel showing through. 3 days after Sirius was arrested. I went to Hogwarts. I sat in his office. I told him everything, about the switch, about Pettigrew's animagus form, about all of it. I begged him to demand a trial. And he listened. He nodded. He offered me a lemon drop. And then he said that sometimes, in times of war, difficult sacrifices had to be made, and that he was sure Sirius would understand. Harry's jaw tightened. He said that. Word for word. I've had 13 years to replay that conversation, Harry. I remember every syllable. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind picked up, throwing sea spray against the windows. You're going to help me get him out, Harry said. It wasn't a question. Andromeda's eyes were bright and fierce. Just tell me what you need. They spent the next hour building the case. Andromeda's testimony was powerful but circumstantial, the word of a disowned Black against the accepted narrative. What Harry needed was something the Wizengamot couldn't ignore, couldn't hand-wave, couldn't bury. He needed the absence of a trial on the record. He needed the Chief Warlock's failure to act documented. And he needed to present it in a way that made refusing a new trial politically impossible. Ragnarok's owl arrived at 9:15 with a package wrapped in brown paper and sealed with the Gringotts crest. Inside was everything Harry had asked for, the Potter Vault audit, the Malfoy financial records, and the Sirius Black documentation. Harry spread the documents on the parlor table and Andromeda leaned over them, her eyes scanning the pages with increasing fury. "There's nothing," she whispered. "No arrest warrant. No formal charges. No trial date. No trial transcript. No sentencing hearing. No evidence log. Nothing. They took him and they threw him in Azkaban and they forgot about him." "They didn't forget," Harry said. "They chose. Every person in the chain of command chose to look away. Bartemius Crouch signed the detention order under emergency powers. Millicent Bagnold, the minister at the time, countersigned. And Dumbledore, as chief warlock, had the authority to demand a judicial review and never did." Andromeda looked at him. "You're going to burn them all down." "I'm going to give them the chance to do the right thing. If they don't, then yes." At 9:30, Harry stood in the study and straightened his jacket. The Elder Wand was on his forearm. The stone was on his finger. The cloak was folded against his chest. Andromeda stood beside him, dressed in formal robes of deep blue, her dark hair pulled back, her face composed and fierce. She looked like what she was, a Black by blood, a Tonks by choice, and someone who was done being patient. "The Wizengamot chamber is in the lowest level of the ministry," Andromeda said. "Department of Mysteries level. The visitor's entrance is through a telephone box in London, but, I know a faster way." He offered her his arm. She took it without hesitation. They stepped. The Ministry of Magic's atrium was a cathedral of politics, a long, echoing chamber of dark polished wood and green tile, dominated by a massive fountain featuring golden statues of a witch, a wizard, a centaur, a goblin, and a house elf. The statues were arranged in a hierarchy that said everything you needed to know about how magical Britain viewed its inhabitants, the witch and wizard on top, tall and noble, with the other three gazing up at them adoringly. Harry looked at the fountain and felt his lip curl. The atrium was busy. Witches and wizards in ministry robes hurried past, clutching files and memos. Paper aeroplanes zoomed overhead, interdepartmental memos, charmed to fold themselves and fly. The air hummed with the low-grade bureaucratic energy of a government going about its business. And then Harry appeared in the middle of it with a crack of displaced air, and the energy changed completely. People stopped. Heads turned. A witch carrying a stack of files dropped them. A wizard with a monocle walked into a pillar. Nobody appeared in the ministry atrium like that. Nobody could appear. The anti-apparition wards were among the strongest in Britain, layered and redundant and maintained by a dedicated team of curse-breakers. Harry hadn't apparat. He'd stepped, and the ministry's wards meant exactly as much to the Lord of Death as the wards at Hogwarts had, which is to say, nothing at all. "Morning," Harry said to the stunned atrium. Andromeda, to her immense credit, released his arm and smoothed her robes as if this were a perfectly normal way to arrive at work. They walked. Harry moved through the atrium with the same calm, unhurried purpose he'd shown in Diagon Alley, and the crowd parted around him. People were staring. Whispering. A few were pointing. Harry ignored all of it. The lifts were at the far end of the atrium, golden grills that clanked and shuddered as they moved between floors. Harry and Andromeda stepped into one, and Harry pressed the button for level 10. The Wizengamot chambers. The lift descended with a series of lurches and groans, and a cool female voice announced each level. Level 2, Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Level 3, Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes. Down and down, into the deep places where the oldest magic in the ministry lived. Level 10. Wizengamot courtrooms. The doors opened onto a stone corridor lit by torches. The air was cooler here, and heavier, and it smelled of old stone and older secrets. At the end of the corridor, heavy doors of black wood stood open, and beyond them, the Wizengamot chamber waited. Harry paused. Andromeda paused beside him. "You're sure about this?" she asked. Not doubting him, checking. Making sure. Completely. They'll try to dismiss you. A child claiming lordship. They'll patronize, they'll obstruct, they'll try to table the motion, let them try. He walked through the doors. The Wisengamot chamber was a stone amphitheater, circular, with tiered benches rising on all sides around a central floor. The benches were occupied, not fully, because Monday sessions rarely drew the complete body, but enough. Maybe 70 of the full 150 members were present, dressed in plum-colored robes with silver W embroidery on the left breast. At the highest point of the chamber sat the chief warlock's bench. It was empty. Dumbledore wasn't here. Harry noticed that. Filed it away. The current session was in progress. A middle-aged wizard with a receding hairline was droning on about cauldron thickness regulations, and the assembled members were in various states of consciousness ranging from alert to actively snoring. A dumpy witch in the front row was knitting. An elderly wizard in the third tier was reading a newspaper behind a poorly concealed disillusionment charm. Harry walked to the center of the floor. The droning wizard stopped mid-sentence. The knitting witch looked up. The newspaper wizard lowered his paper. One by one, 70 pairs of eyes swiveled to the small boy standing in the middle of the most powerful judicial body in Wizarding Britain. "Who?" the droning wizard started. "My name is Harry James Potter," Harry said, and his voice carried through the stone chamber with a clarity that had nothing to do with volume and everything to do with the magic woven into the walls. The chamber was designed to amplify the speaker on the central floor, and it did its job very well. "I am the confirmed and ratified Lord of the most ancient and noble house of Potter, the most ancient and most noble house of Peverell, and the most ancient and noble house of Black. I hold 3 seats on this body. And I am invoking my right of lordly address to bring an emergency matter before the Wisengamot." Silence. Complete, ringing, stunned silence. Then the chamber erupted. Voices. Dozens of them. Outrage, confusion, disbelief. A heavy-set wizard in the 5th row surged to his feet. "This is absurd. A child cannot." A thin witch with a monocle cut him off. "Lordly address is an ancient right, it has no age restriction." The droning wizard at the podium was opening and closing his mouth like a beached fish. The knitting witch had dropped a stitch and was swearing under her breath. A gavel banged. The witch wielding it was seated at a smaller bench beside the empty chief warlock's chair. The deputy chief warlock, a severe-looking woman with steel-gray hair and a face that suggested she had never found anything amusing in her entire life. "Order," she barked. "Order in the chamber." The gavel banged again, and the noise subsided to a hostile murmur. She turned her gaze on Harry, and it was the kind of gaze that had probably been making grown wizards uncomfortable for decades. "You claim to be Harry Potter." "I am Harry Potter." "Harry Potter is a child. He is not of age. He cannot hold a Wisengamot seat, let alone 3. Harry reached into his jacket and produced a sheaf of documents: the Gringotts certification, the blood inheritance results, the marriage contract. He held them up, and with a gentle push of magic, they duplicated themselves and floated to every occupied bench in the chamber, settling in front of each member like politely delivered bombs. "Gringotts blood inheritance confirmation," Harry said, as the members picked up the documents with varying degrees of wariness. "Certified by Director Ragnarok himself. Blood of Potter, through my father James. Blood of Peverell, through the Potter line's descent from Ignotus Peverell. Blood of Black, through my grandmother Doria Black. The Peverell-Black marriage contract, enacted in 1278, which supersedes ministry age restrictions and grants full inheritance rights to the confirmed heir regardless of age. That contract is 700 years old," the heavy-set wizard sputtered. "It can't possibly still be valid, it's sealed in blood magic, Lord Parkinson. Older than the ministry, older than the Wisengamot, older than Hogwarts. If you'd like to challenge the validity of a blood contract sealed by magic herself, you're welcome to try. I believe the traditional method involves a formal duel with the head of the challenging house." Harry paused. "Would you like to duel me, Lord Parkinson?" Parkinson went the color of old cheese and sat down very quickly. The Deputy Chief Warlock examined the documents. She read them carefully, line by line, and Harry watched her expression shift from skepticism to reluctant acknowledgement to something that looked almost like respect. "The documents appear to be in order," she said. "Gringotts certification carries legal weight under the Treaty of 1412. The marriage contract is unprecedented, but the magical signatures are intact." She looked at Harry with those severe, assessing eyes. "The right of lordly address is recognized. State your business, Lord Potter." "I'm here about Sirius Black." The chamber went quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet, not stunned, but wary. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Sirius Black is a convicted criminal," someone said from the upper benches. "What business could you possibly—" "Sirius Black is not convicted," Harry said. "That's the point." He raised his hand, and another set of documents floated from his jacket, Ragnarok's documentation, the complete legal record, or rather the complete absence of one. The pages drifted to every bench, and the chamber rustled with the sound of parchment being turned and read. "What you're holding," Harry said, "is a comprehensive search of all Ministry judicial records relating to Sirius Orion Black. Conducted by Gringotts, at my request, using their legal access rights under the Banking Accord of 1679. The search covered every archive, every department, every filing system in the ministry." He let them read. He let the silence build. "There is no trial transcript," he continued, "because there was no trial. There is no sentencing document, because there was no sentencing hearing. There is no evidence log, because no evidence was ever formally presented. There is no arrest warrant, because no warrant was ever issued. There is no formal charge sheet. There is no veritaserum testimony. There is no testimony of any kind, from any witness, under oath or otherwise." The chamber was very still. Sirius Black was arrested on November 1, 1981. He was transported directly to Azkaban under emergency detention orders signed by Bartemius Crouch Sr., then head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, and countersigned by Minister Millicent Bagnold. Those emergency orders were valid for 30 days. At the end of 30 days, a formal trial was legally required to continue detention. Harry paused. No trial was held. No extension was requested. The 30-day orders expired, and Sirius Black remained in Azkaban. He has been held illegally for over 13 years. The eruption was immediate and enormous. Half the chamber was on its feet. Voices clashed and tangled, fury, denial, accusation, defense. A wizard in the third row was shouting about due process. A witch in the seventh row was shouting about national security. Lord Parkinson was shouting that this was a trick, a stunt, that the boy was being manipulated. Through it all, one man sat perfectly still. Lucius Malfoy occupied a bench in the second tier, dressed in robes of black silk with a silver serpent clasp at his throat. He was pale and sharp-featured and beautiful in the way that a well-made blade is beautiful, and he was watching Harry with eyes the color of winter sky and an expression of absolute, focused calculation. Harry met his gaze. Held it. Didn't blink. Malfoy smiled. It was a thin, cold, predatory smile, and it said, "I see you, boy. I see what you're doing. And I am going to stop you." Harry smiled back. His smile said, "Please try." The gavel banged. Again. Again. The Deputy Chief Warlock's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Order. I will have order or I will clear this chamber." The noise died in fits and starts, and she turned to Harry with an expression that was struggling to remain judicial. "Lord Potter. These are serious allegations. They're not allegations. They're facts. Documented, certified, and irrefutable. A British citizen has been imprisoned for 13 years without trial. That is not a matter of opinion. It is a matter of law. The circumstances of Black's arrest were, the war had just ended, the country was in chaos, the war ended 13 years ago. At what point does chaos stop being an excuse and start being a cover-up? The Deputy Chief Warlock's mouth thinned to a razor line. She looked around the chamber, reading the room, the shock, the anger, the uncomfortable shuffling of people who had been part of the system that had failed. What are you proposing, Lord Potter? A trial. An actual trial, conducted according to wizarding law, with Veritasium testimony and proper legal representation. If Sirius Black is guilty, I will accept the verdict and he will return to Azkaban. If he is innocent, Harry let the silence do the work. And who would prosecute? A voice called from the upper benches. Who would defend? The case is 13 years cold, the case was never opened, Harry said. There's nothing to reopen. This would be the first and only trial of Sirius Black. The prosecution can present whatever evidence they have, assuming they have any, which, based on the complete absence of documentation in their own files, seems unlikely. As for the defense, he glanced at Andromeda, who stood at the edge of the chamber floor, straight-backed and steady. I have a witness who will testify, under Veritasium if required, that Sirius Black was not the secret keeper for the Potter family. That the secret keeper was Peter Pettigrew. And that this information was provided to Albus Dumbledore within days of Black's arrest and was ignored. The name, Dumbledore, landed in the chamber like a stone in a pond. Ripples spread. Glances were exchanged. The uncomfortable shuffling intensified. Lucius Malfoy stood. He rose with the practiced grace of a man who had spent his entire life commanding rooms, and when he spoke, his voice was silk over steel, smooth and reasonable and absolutely poisonous. This is all very dramatic, he said. A child, claiming ancient lordships, storming into the Wizengamot with accusations against the chief warlock himself. It makes for excellent theater. But I must question the motives behind this performance. He smiled at Harry. That thin, cold smile. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, suddenly appears after 9 years of seclusion, claiming powers and titles that haven't been invoked in centuries, demanding the release of a known Death Eater, accused Death Eater, Harry corrected. Never convicted. There's a distinction. You'd know something about that, Lord Malfoy, given your own history with the accusation. The silence that followed could have cut glass. Malfoy's smile didn't waver. I was cleared of all charges. The Imperius Curse, yes, the Imperius Defense. Very popular in the early 80s. Half the Death Eaters in this room used it. Harry didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. The chamber's acoustics did the work, and the words landed on every bench with perfect clarity. But we're not here to relitigate old trials, Lord Malfoy. We're here to hold the first trial for a man who never had one. Unless you're opposed to due process. I am opposed to spectacle. Then you must find Wizengamot sessions very difficult. A few members laughed. Quickly stifled, but the damage was done. Malfoy's composure flickered, a hairline crack in the porcelain, and Harry saw something behind it. Not just anger. Fear. Malfoy was afraid, and Harry knew why. If Sirius Black was tried under Veritasium, the truth about the secret keeper switch would come out. Peter Pettigrew's betrayal would be confirmed. And that would raise questions, uncomfortable, dangerous questions about who else in Voldemort's circle had been protected, who else had escaped justice, who else had bought their freedom with gold and lies. Questions that Lucius Malfoy could not afford to have asked. I move for a vote, Harry said, turning back to the Deputy Chief Warlock. A simple majority to authorize a trial for Sirius Black, to be held within 7 days, with Veritasium testimony and full legal protections. I invoke my right as a Lord of 3 Houses to demand an immediate vote on a matter of justice. The Deputy Chief Warlock looked at the chamber. She looked at the documents on every bench. She looked at the empty Chief Warlock's chair, where Dumbledore should have been sitting, and her expression said very clearly that she had thoughts about his absence. The motion is recognized, she said. All in favor of authorizing a trial for Sirius Black, to be conducted within 7 days under full judicial protocols, raise your wands. Wands went up. Slowly at first, then faster, as the weight of the evidence and the pressure of public scrutiny overrode political calculation. The light faction voted yes almost unanimously. The neutral faction followed, reluctantly but inevitably. The documentation was too clear, the legal argument too airtight. Even some of the dark faction raised their wands, because voting against a trial looked worse than allowing one. Lucius Malfoy did not raise his wand. Neither did Parkinson, or a cluster of others in the upper tiers who shared the same faintly nauseous expression. It didn't matter. The count wasn't even close. The motion carries, the Deputy Chief Warlock announced. 53 in favor, 12 against, 5 abstentions. A trial for Sirius Black will be scheduled within 7 days. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement is hereby directed to arrange the transfer of the prisoner from Azkaban and to prepare the prosecution's case. Lord Potter, you will be permitted to arrange for the defense. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Don't thank me, Lord Potter. This is going to be a circus. Circuses are fun, Harry said. It's the ringmasters you have to watch out for. He turned and walked out of the chamber. Andromeda fell into step beside him. Behind them, the Wizengamot dissolved into furious, buzzing conversation that would feed the rumor mill of Wizarding Britain for weeks. They were halfway down the stone corridor when Lucius Malfoy caught up. Lord Potter. Harry stopped. Turned. Malfoy was walking toward them with the unhurried stride of a man who wanted to appear casual and wasn't quite pulling it off. His cane, silver-headed, containing a wand, because Lucius Malfoy was the kind of man who kept weapons disguised as accessories, tapped against the stone floor with each step. A word, Malfoy said. In private. Anything you want to say to me, you can say in front of Mrs. Tonks. Malfoy's eyes flicked to Andromeda. Something moved behind them, contempt, mostly, the reflexive disdain of a man who had married into the Black family and considered the disowned sister beneath his notice. Very well. He stopped a few feet away and folded his hands over the head of his cane. You've made quite an entrance, Lord Potter. Very impressive. Very theatrical. But I wonder if you've considered the consequences of what you've set in motion. I've considered them extensively. Have you? Because from where I stand, you've just declared war on the established order of Wizarding Britain. You've challenged the Chief Warlock, embarrassed the Ministry, and demanded the trial of a man most of the country believes is a mass murderer. You've made enemies today, Lord Potter. Powerful enemies. I've made one enemy, Lord Malfoy. You. Everyone else in that chamber voted to authorize the trial. Malfoy's smile thinned. I'm not your enemy, Lord Potter. I'm trying to help you. You're a child, a remarkable child, clearly, but a child nonetheless, and you're swimming in waters that have drowned men 3 times your age. The political landscape of this country is not a game. It has rules, and alliances, and debts, and the people who navigate it successfully are the ones who understand that sometimes, the wise course is to compromise. Is that what you did? Compromise? When you stood in front of the Wizengamot and claimed you'd been under the Imperius curse the whole time you were serving Voldemort? The name hit Malfoy like a slap. He flinched, actually flinched, the reflexive terror of a man who had spent years in service to something monstrous and had never stopped being afraid of it. Don't say that name, he hissed. Voldemort. Tom Riddle. A half-blood orphan who convinced a bunch of pure-blood aristocrats that he was their superior and sent them out to murder and torture on his behalf, and when he fell, every single one of them scrambled to deny they'd ever believed in him. Harry stepped closer. He was a foot shorter than Malfoy and had to look up to meet his eyes, and somehow that made it worse, more intense, more unsettling, because the power radiating off the boy was so wildly disproportionate to his size that the incongruity was almost physically uncomfortable. I know what you are, Lord Malfoy. I know what you did. I have documentation, financial records, transaction logs, a paper trail that connects you to bribes, intimidation, and the systematic corruption of ministry officials over a period of 15 years. Malfoy's face was a mask, but behind the mask, something was crumbling. If you come at me, Harry said, if you try to sabotage the trial, or threaten me, or use your influence to protect yourself at Sirius Black's expense, I will release those documents. Not to the ministry. To the Daily Prophet. To every witch and wizard in Britain. And then I will come for your vaults, your properties, and every galleon you've ever hidden in the Black family accounts, which, as Lord Black, now control. The corridor was very quiet. Torch flames flickered on the walls. Somewhere above them, the ministry went about its business, oblivious. Malfoy stared at Harry for a long moment. Then he did something Harry hadn't expected, he laughed. Not a warm laugh. A dry, brittle, disbelieving laugh, the laugh of a man who has just realized that the ground he's standing on is not as solid as he thought. You're 9 years old, he said. So I keep hearing. Malfoy straightened. The mask slid back into place, but it was thinner, and the cracks were showing, and they both knew it. This isn't over, Lord Potter. No, Harry agreed. It isn't. But Lucius? He let the first name hang in the air, deliberate and intimate, because nothing unsettled a man like Lucius Malfoy more than a child treating him as an equal. The next move is yours. Choose carefully. He turned and walked away. Andromeda walked beside him. They didn't speak until they were in the lift, rising through the ministry, and then Andromeda leaned against the wall and let out a breath that seemed to empty her entirely. That, she said, was the most terrifying thing I have ever witnessed. And I grew up with Bellatrix. Harry almost smiled. Was it too much? It was exactly enough. You put the fear of God in him. Not God. Something older. The lift doors opened on the atrium. They walked through it, and this time, people weren't just staring, they were whispering, pointing, clutching each other's arms. Word had already begun to spread. The boy who lived had appeared in the Wizengamot. He'd claimed 3 lordships. He'd demanded a trial for Sirius Black. By evening, it would be the front page of every newspaper in magical Britain. They stepped back to the Peverell estate. Mipsy had lunch waiting, an absurd spread that included soup, sandwiches, roast beef, 3 kinds of salad, and a trifle, and Andromeda ate with the grateful intensity of someone who had burned a great deal of nervous energy and needed to refuel. What happens now? She asked, between bites of roast beef. Now we prepare for the trial. I need to arrange for Sirius to have legal representation, real representation, not a ministry-appointed placeholder. Do you know any solicitors? Ted's sister is a barrister. Muggle-trained, but she passed the wizarding bar exam as well. She's good. She's fierce. Perfect. Contact her. I'll cover all legal fees from the Black Vault. And the evidence? Beyond my testimony. I'm going to find Peter Pettigrew. Andromeda stopped chewing. He's dead. Sirius killed him. That's the whole point, isn't it? The explosion, the finger, you just told me he faked his death. If he's an animagus, a rat, then he's been hiding as a rat for 13 years. Rats don't live that long, which means he's either dead or he's been living with wizards. Hiding in plain sight. He could feel death stirring. The ancient presence shifted, turned its attention outward, and Harry felt the vast network of perception that came with the mantle extend and focus, searching for something specific, a soul that should have passed on and hadn't, a life that should have ended and continued, a rat that was more than a rat. The answer came back in seconds. Hogwarts, Harry said. Andromeda blinked. What? Peter Pettigrew is at Hogwarts. Hiding as a rat. Living with a wizarding family as a pet. How can you possibly? I can feel every living thing in Britain if I try hard enough. Every heartbeat, every breath. And Peter Pettigrew's heartbeat is wrong, it's human rhythm in a rat's body, and it's been that way for 13 years. Harry stood. He's in Gryffindor Tower. In the third-year boys' dormitory. You're going to Hogwarts. Again. I'm going to Hogwarts again. He paused. You should stay here. Rest. Contact Ted's sister. I'll be back soon. Harry, be careful. If Pettigrew realizes he's been found, he'll run. I know. That's why I'm not going to give him the chance. He stepped to Hogwarts. The castle was busier this time, Monday afternoon, classes in session, the corridors echoing with the sounds of students moving between lessons. Harry appeared in an empty corridor on the 7th floor and walked quickly toward Gryffindor Tower, guided by the castle's now familiar warmth. He could feel Pettigrew. The wrong heartbeat, human fast in a rat-small body, pulsing like a beacon in his awareness. 3rd floor. Moving, scurrying along a corridor, following a red-headed boy who carried him in the pocket of his robes. Harry intercepted them on the stairs between the 3rd and 4th floors. The red-headed boy was about 13, tall and gangly, with freckles and a nose that was slightly too long for his face. He was walking with 2 other students, a bushy-haired girl with an armful of books and a round-faced boy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, and he had a fat, gray rat sitting on his shoulder. The rat's eyes were fixed on Harry. They were human eyes. Watery and blue and wide with sudden, paralyzing terror. "Hi," Harry said, blocking the staircase. "Sorry to bother you. That's a nice rat." The red-headed boy blinked. Thanks. Who are you?" "Harry Potter." The effect was instantaneous. All 3 students froze. The bushy-haired girl's mouth fell open. The round-faced boy made a squeaking sound. The red-headed boy stared, his eyes darting to Harry's forehead, to the scar, and his face went through about 7 expressions in 2 seconds. "Bloody hell," he breathed. "You're Harry Potter. But you're not supposed to be at Hogwarts until next year, I'm visiting. What's your name?" "Ron. Ron Weasley." He was still staring. "Are you really, is that really, the scar?" "Yes." "Listen, Ron, this is going to sound strange, but I need your rat." "Scabbers?" "What do you want with Scabbers?" The rat was trying to escape. It was squirming violently in Ron's pocket, its tiny claws scrabbling against the fabric, and its eyes, those human, terrified eyes, were locked on Harry with the desperate focus of a cornered animal. Harry reached out with his power and held Pettigrew in place. Not roughly, just a gentle, absolute pressure, like a hand closing around a fist. The rat went rigid. Its whiskers twitched frantically, but it couldn't move. "Your rat's name is Scabbers," Harry said. "Yeah, he was my brother Percy's before. How long have you had him?" Percy got him when he started Hogwarts, so, 5 years? Maybe 6. And how old was he before that?" Ron frowned. "I dunno. A few years. He's getting on a bit. My mum says, rats live 2 to 3 years, Ron. Your rat is at least 11 years old. Doesn't that seem odd?" The bushy-haired girl, Hermione, Harry would learn later, though at the moment she was just the girl with the books, snapped to attention. "That is odd. Magical pets can live longer than normal animals, but a common rat, he's not a common rat." Harry looked at the frozen rodent. "He's not a rat at all." And then, because the moment demanded it and because sometimes the most effective thing you could do was simply act, Harry raised the Elder Wand and cast a spell he had never been taught, that he knew the way he knew how to breathe, instinctively, completely, and without doubt. A flash of blue-white light hit the rat. The transformation was grotesque. The small gray body stretched, expanded, twisted, limbs elongated, fur receded, features ballooned outward as if someone were inflating a person-shaped balloon from the inside. Ron stumbled backward with a yell, and Hermione grabbed the round-faced boy and pulled him out of the way, and in the space of 3 horrible seconds, the rat became a man. Peter Pettigrew stood on the stairs. He was small and soft and doughy, with thinning colorless hair and a pointed nose and watery blue eyes that darted frantically around the corridor. His robes, conjured by the reversal spell, because the alternative was worse, were ill-fitting and dirty, and he was hunched and twitching and everything about him screamed prey. "No," he whimpered. "No, no, please, Peter Pettigrew," Harry said. "Believed dead for 13 years. Very much alive. Very much hiding. Who are you? I don't, you know who I am. I can see it in your eyes. You knew the moment you saw me on the stairs." Pettigrew's gaze fixed on Harry's scar, and his face crumpled. Not with grief or shame, but with the abject, wretched terror of a man whose lies have finally caught up with him and who has nowhere left to run. "Please," he whispered. "You don't understand. He would have killed me. The Dark Lord, he was going to kill me if I didn't. I had no choice, you had every choice. You chose to betray my parents. You chose to frame Sirius Black. You chose to murder 12 innocent people to fake your own death. You chose to hide as a rat for 13 years while an innocent man suffered in Azkaban for your crimes." Harry's voice was flat and cold and not raised even slightly, and it was more terrible for its calm than any scream could have been. "You chose all of it, Peter. Every single bit." Ron was pressed against the wall, white-faced, staring at the man who had been his pet rat for years. Hermione had her wand out, pointed at Pettigrew, her hand steady even though her face was pale. The round-faced boy, Neville, Harry would learn, had planted himself in the corridor behind Pettigrew, blocking the retreat route with a stubbornness that belied his nervous exterior. "I'm going to take you to the Ministry," Harry said. "You're going to testify under Veritaserum. You're going to tell them the truth about the Secret Keeper switch, about my parents, about everything. And then Sirius Black is going to go free. No, they'll put me in Azkaban, the Dementors. You should have thought about that before you chose the Dark Lord over your friends." Pettigrew lunged. Not at Harry, at the window. A desperate, animal surge toward the only exit, his body already beginning to shrink and shift as he tried to transform back into a rat. Harry closed his fist. The transformation stopped. Pettigrew hung in midair, suspended by a force he couldn't see or fight or understand, his body locked halfway between forms. One hand was still a paw, his teeth were too large, his nose was too pointed, and he squealed with a sound that was half human and half rodent and entirely pathetic. "Don't," Harry said. "Just the one word." Pettigrew sagged in the invisible grip and began to cry. Harry bound him, magical ropes, conjured from the Elder Wand with a flick of his wrist, tight enough to hold but not to harm, and lowered him to the floor. Then he turned to the 3 students who were staring at him as if he'd just performed a miracle, which, from their perspective, he more or less had. "Ron," Harry said. "I'm sorry about your rat. He was a person." Ron's voice was climbing toward a register that only dogs could hear. "He slept in my bed. Try not to think about it. I'm going to think about nothing else for the rest of my life." Hermione stepped forward. Her wand was still out, her eyes were bright, and her expression was the particular combination of shock and fascination that Harry would come to recognize as her default setting when confronted with something extraordinary. "You're really Harry Potter," she said. "I've read about you in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts, and most of what's in those books is wrong. I'm beginning to suspect that." She looked at Pettigrew, bound and weeping on the floor. "What are you going to do with him?" "Take him to the Ministry. He's evidence." "Can I help?" Harry looked at her. 13 years old, bushy hair, front teeth a little too large, holding her wand like she knew exactly how to use it and was hoping someone would give her a reason. Brave. Smart. Angry on behalf of a man she'd never met, because the injustice of it offended something fundamental in her. "What's your name?" he asked. Hermione Granger. Hermione. Thank you. But I've got this. Just, keep an eye on Ron. He looks like he might faint. I am not going to faint, Ron said, and then sat down heavily on the stairs, which was basically fainting in slow motion. Harry wrapped Pettigrew in the cloak of invisibility, not to hide him, but because the cloak's magic would prevent any further transformation attempts, and lifted him with a casual wave of the wand. The bound, invisible, weeping traitor floated beside him like a very depressing balloon. I'll be back, Harry told the students. Probably. Hogwarts is nice. He stepped to the ministry. Directly to the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Directly into the office of Amelia Bones, the head of the department, who was sitting at her desk reviewing reports and who very nearly drew her wand when a 9-year-old boy appeared out of thin air in front of her with a floating invisible prisoner. Madam Bones, Harry said. I have a delivery. He pulled the cloak off Pettigrew, and Peter Pettigrew, wanted for mass murder, believed dead, very much alive, tumbled onto the carpet of the head of Magical Law Enforcement's office, bound and sobbing. Amelia Bones stared. She was a stocky, square-jawed witch with a monocle and the unshakable composure of someone who had survived 2 wars, and even she needed a moment. Is that, she said slowly, Peter Pettigrew? It is. Found him at Hogwarts, living as a rat in Gryffindor Tower. He's an unregistered animagus. He's also the real secret keeper who betrayed my parents to Voldemort and framed Sirius Black for his crimes. Harry set the cloak back inside his jacket. I believe the trial you've been asked to organize just got a lot more interesting. Bones looked at Pettigrew. Looked at Harry. Looked back at Pettigrew. Sit down, Lord Potter, she said. I think you'd better tell me everything. Harry sat. He told her. It took about 20 minutes, and by the end of it, Amelia Bones was gripping her quill so tightly it had cracked, and her face held the expression of a woman who had dedicated her life to justice and was only now discovering how badly the system she served had failed. I'll have Pettigrew in a holding cell within the hour, she said. Veritaserum interrogation before the day is out. And I will personally oversee the arrangements for Black's trial. She met Harry's eyes. This is going to shake the foundations of magical Britain, Lord Potter. The foundations needed shaking. Perhaps they did. She stood. Extended her hand. You have my word. This will be done properly. Harry shook her hand. Her grip was strong, her eyes were clear, and for the first time since he'd entered the magical world, he felt like he'd found someone in a position of authority who actually deserved it. He stepped home. The sun was setting over Cornwall. The sea was hammered gold. Andromeda was in the parlor with a pot of tea and a stack of legal notes, and when Harry walked in, she took one look at his face and set down her cup. What happened? I found Pettigrew. Alive. At Hogwarts, living as a rat with a student family. He's in ministry custody. Amelia Bones is handling it personally. Andromeda pressed both hands over her mouth. Her eyes filled. She didn't make a sound for a long moment, and when she lowered her hands, her voice was steady but her chin was trembling. 13 years, she whispered. 13 years he's been in that place, with the Dementors, for something he didn't do. And the proof was living as a pet rat in a school dormitory the entire time. It's over now. The trial will happen within the week. Pettigrew will testify under Veritaserum. Sirius will be free. You did this in 2 days. 2 days. I had help. Harry looked toward the corner where Death stood, silent and patient and eternally present. I had a lot of help. Andromeda didn't see Death. But she saw Harry looking, and something in her expression shifted, not fear, but awe, the kind of awe you feel when you realize you're standing next to something much larger than yourself. Thank you, she said. From the bottom of my heart, Harry. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when he's free. He ate dinner. He bathed. He climbed into the tower room and lay in the enormous bed and stared at the ceiling and felt the three hallows humming in harmony, a quiet chord that resonated in his chest like a second heartbeat. You destroyed 2 Horcruxes, Death said, from the darkness. Claimed the 3 hallows. Confronted Dumbledore. Outmaneuvered Malfoy. Captured Pettigrew. Set in motion the liberation of an innocent man. You did all of this in 48 hours. I'm aware. 5 Horcruxes remain. Voldemort's wraith still clings to existence. Dumbledore is planning. Malfoy is scheming. The Ministry is compromised. And there are forces in the magical world that have not yet become aware of you but will, soon, and when they do, the board will change in ways neither of us can fully predict. I know. Are you afraid? Harry turned the question over in his mind. Examined it honestly, the way he examined everything, not with the self-deception of someone trying to be brave, but with the clear-eyed assessment of someone who understood that fear was not weakness but information. No, he said. I'm not afraid. I'm 9 years old and I command the boundary between life and death and I just shook the foundations of Wizarding Britain before tea time. I have a house that loves me and an elf who wants to feed me until I explode and an aunt I didn't know I had who turns out to be brilliant and fierce and exactly the kind of family I always wanted. I have the Hallows. I have gold. I have allies. And I have you. He paused. I'm not afraid. I'm ready. Death was quiet for a long time. The sea crashed against the cliffs. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and cold and indifferent to the affairs of mortals, and the Lord of Death lay in his bed in his tower and waited. Then rest, my lord, Death said. Tomorrow we hunt Horcruxes. Tomorrow we free your godfather. Tomorrow, we continue the work. What work? And Death's answer came, the same answer it had given on the first night, in the attic at Privet Drive, when a starved and lonely boy had touched a parchment with bleeding fingers and changed the world, everything. Harry smiled. He closed his eyes. Sleep came easily, carried on the sound of the waves and the warmth of the Hallows and the deep, unshakable knowledge that he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was supposed to do. Outside, the wind shifted. The clouds parted. And for a single, brilliant moment, the moon emerged, full and white and luminous, and its light fell through the tower window and illuminated the sleeping boy in silver, and the 3 Hallows on his bedside table glowed in answer, and the ancient house hummed with a magic older than memory. The Lord of Death slept. And the world, whether it knew it yet or not, had already begun to change.